Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Thanks for coming in. Can everyone hear at the back? Okay, so the acoustics are good. So this is a really interesting session, and it's about what sort of describes my personal professional life, which is digital marketing, at least to some extent. And so when Archana asked me to moderate, I thought it was a great opportunity. I'd love to share whatever, and more than that, bring whatever out that I can from our esteemed panelists. The gentleman to my right needs absolutely no introduction, so I'm not going to get into that. So I'll come back to Harsh in a moment. And the gentleman on my left is Nils Michaelis, who is the Managing Director APAC for Accenture Digital. And he's someone who's been in the digital business for a very long time. How many of you remember Napster? How many of you use Napster? Naughty, naughty. Okay, all right. So, sorry?
Before it was illegal.
Before it was illegal. Okay, fine. Then you're
Same
all
here,
right.
same here.
Oh, really? Okay. So he started off at Napster in '98. That was his first entry into digital, and he's been associated with it in one form or another since then. So it's safe to say that he's extremely experienced and knowledgeable in this field. My name is Roopak Saluja. My background is from the advertising space. I am an ASCENT member from the group called VWin, and we're going to complete 5 years this year. Time flies. I am the founder of two companies which are in the digital space. One is entirely in the digital space. The other is mostly in the digital space. So my companies are the 120 Media Collective and Sooperfly. One provides services to brands in the field of digital marketing and production of all kinds of content and TV commercials, etc. And the other is a digital media company. Okay, so I'm not going to bore you more about myself, but that was important, I suppose, just to set the context. Before I invite our panelists to answer specific questions, what I'm going to do is, let me tell you how we will structure this. We have about an hour now. We have a break of about 15-20 minutes, and then we have another hour. Now, I think you were asked if you had any specific questions, and boy, did you have specific questions. So what we've done is we've structured the first hour around those questions, and we will try to answer those questions, not directly, but broadly. We've structured the topics of discussion in a way where we will bring out answers to those questions. If you find for some reason that your specific question was not answered, please feel free to raise your hand in the second part to ask those questions. I think we're going to run out of time. Okay, so I will try to get my panelists to move from topic to topic. So please pardon any interruptions that in the interest of time. For you to know, we have taken whatever you asked and broadly structured this into a few categories. The first is digital marketing from the perspective of startups, SMEs, family-owned businesses, promoter-driven organizations, whatever you want to call almost all of us who are here today. Okay, and that's probably everyone's question. A lot of people have asked that question, and so it's not a question, but it's just sort of thoughts and wondering if it's for you, how do you go about it, etc. So that's the first thing that we're going to talk about. From there, we will move into another very popular topic that came up from time to time, which is B2C versus B2B. Okay, is digital marketing applicable and relevant for B2B organizations? Right. The answer is you'll see it's a very emphatic answer in one direction, but you'll see the reasons for it as well. Number three will be content and platforms, broadly speaking. Right, social media we'll cover video, we'll cover content marketing, etc., etc. The fourth and fifth, which are closely related, are ROI and measurability. Right, ROI from a financial perspective, what the first part to ROI is, how much are you investing in the first place, how do you come to that conclusion, etc., etc. And then measurability, how do you know if this is even effective? Are you doing well? Are you not doing well? How do you know if you're going to do it again next year, etc., etc., right? And the sixth part, really, there was no other way to really put everything together except call it tools, tech, and tactics. You had some very specific questions over there as well. So these are the 6 basic areas, and we'll go through this. And before we begin, I think I'd just like to start by saying with 3 points regarding where we are in digital marketing per se, in this country, in the world, in the context of what we are doing, and the world at large. Right? The first is that India, in terms of digital marketing spend, and I know I've been in this business, digital one way or another, since 2009, and we have been slowly moving towards what we call the $1 billion ad spend mark as an industry. Okay, and slowly, as in very slowly, and it kept evading us mainly because of our rupee and the exchange rate, but also because we didn't really, things weren't moving as they should have perhaps, right? Finally, in the year 2016, I think we crossed to touch, 8,000 crores. So whatever the exchange rate, we did make it, okay? And from now until 2020, we expect it to get to 25,000 crores. And my apologies to the Accenture people in the room. This is a KPMG and Group M study, which also says that...
We forgive you.
Thank you. That 47% growth for this year is what's expected for digital marketing, right? So we have finally crossed that tipping point, and it's moving very fast. The second point I wanted to make is that there is a context, right? We're talking about digital marketing, but at the same time, you must realize that there are a lot of forms of digital marketing, and you have things like ad blockers, and there are 120 million ad blockers in India alone. Okay, so these things are impediments to that growth, but then there are other ways around it, which we'll talk about. So I think what we'll be able to bring out, hopefully today for you, is not just plain vanilla digital marketing, but the entire sphere of it. It's not about buying it. How many people over here have clicked on a banner? Okay, that's more than I thought. He hasn't clicked on a banner.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you have?
Yes, too many times. I guess.
Oh, okay, fine. Harsh, have you ever clicked on a banner?
I'm very poor at all this. What is the banner?
While going online, you must have seen an ad. Have you clicked on one?
No.
So that's it. I've clicked on one, not two, one.
But 10 years ago or recently?
Recently, just to see what it was like, if something would happen, but nothing major happened. So that's the other point that you have to take into consideration. And the third point, which is a little bit of a provocative statement given what we're sitting here for, is that digital marketing is dead. Long live digital marketing. Okay, so we have to stop thinking of, and hopefully we can bring that out, there is no marketing in digital marketing. We are now in an era where all marketing is one, and a lot of it is digitally powered and digitally enabled. So that's hopefully what we can come to. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Harsh a specific question to bring him into this, which is that, I think when I think of Marico and the positioning, the corporate positioning of the company today, the word that's most strongly associated with it in my head is innovation, for various reasons. And you've deliberately gone about that and succeeded tremendously in that. How has that actually affected your thinking in terms of the word digital and where the world is headed, and how does that really play into, say, the way that Marico views digital transformation, perhaps?
See, I think I'm going back almost 1 or 2 years back, and I'm associating the word digital in a little more broader context. It's just not marketing, but the whole disruption in technology, which includes digital, which includes sensors, algorithms, Internet of Things, robotics, and what it is likely to do to organizations is something which started occupying our minds about 2 years back. And we said that if we have to look at this, we have to look at it from an opportunity lens and not a threat lens. And many industries have been wiped out by these technological disruptions. And today I think we must be sitting on one of the, in terms of times, the technology disruptions are going to be the highest as of today in the history of mankind, I think. And when you see the combination of technology which are going to disrupt, I think it is quite mind-boggling. So I think we said that can we form a group And the first trigger was, okay, before 2 years or 1.5 years, we were handling digital in some way, but we said that we have to look at a far more holistic picture, and can we organize almost 20-30 senior managers at an offsite, and we called Professor Ramcharan to address us. And I think based on that workshop, we decided that we have to take this subject very seriously. We have to have dedicated people who are going to be looking at this and look at scenarios, what it can do to us, and the impact it can have on us versus any of you could be very different. I think a lot will depend on the kind of business you are in. So there will be an organizational impact, there will be an impact on your brand, and there will be functional impact like digital marketing. So I think the key thing is, can we be on top of that? And if you really have to move digital, I think youngsters are very important. So you recruit the right quality of young minds who think in that manner and not some oldie like me. So considering that, we have Mukesh, who's I think sitting there. Mukesh, can you just stand up? Yeah. And maybe some of the answers he can handle it better. He is leading the digital transformation in Marico. I think post that we started working with Boston Consulting. Mukesh? For our digital journey and what we can do, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So they give us a blueprint in terms of what all we need to do. And it is occupying a lot of top management attention in terms of what we are doing, what we intend to do. We also make a presentation to our board of directors in terms of what is the journey. So all I am saying is that this is a very important subject for all of us. And we have to take it very seriously. And future is not completely predictable. You have to look at different scenarios. But you have to start thinking on this. And you have to get the right minds who can actually help you in terms of predicting what future can unfold for you. And then man yourself in terms of individuals who are very much in tune with this subject, and remove what we call escape buttons. You know, those individuals should not be doing too many things, and digital is just one of the many things they're doing. So remove escape button and make them completely responsible for the digital journey, because the developments are so fast that you have to proactively look at what's happening in the environment and how it is likely to impact your business. So I think that's been our journey, and I think I must say that the team has done some good work, and we got some awards also. Mukesh, can you just say something more than what I have added?
We've had a digital framework which has been kept for the organization. Where we say we'll listen, engage, and reach out to the consumer. That's on the marketing side. Then we'll sell, which is selling online and e-commerce. And then whatever data gets generated, do analytics and automation. So that's the framework with which we.
And I think we're looking at all functions, including HR, and what digital can do to improve our employee value proposition and whatnot. So it is a multifunctional approach to.
Wherever we had a lot of data, for example in sales, there we've been able to do a lot of deep dive into analytics and further insights into that. Wherever we didn't have digitalization, so to say, so HR, employee engagement, as well as R&D, as well as manufacturing. So that's where we started the initial steps. So it's across all the functions, including digital marketing and other marketing kind of engagements like programmatic buying or targeting.
And we have, in terms of marketing structure, we have 1 or 2 dedicated resources who are looking after digital, or each brand it looks after. Sorry? Center of Excellence.
Which looks at the digital media specifically.
Yes.
And we also have a specific person under the new business which looks after different kinds of engagement models. So we recently made an investment in Beardo, which is an online mail routing platform. So that's a new digital business innovation.
Right. It's interesting what you said earlier about learning from younger people. I think Nitin Pranjpe, the ex-CEO of HUN, who talked about once how he spends an hour every week with this 28-year-old guy who's his tutor.
Reverse mentoring.
Reverse mentoring, exactly.
We do that in the organization. The whole team, I think, I have not started doing, but the managing director and his team are all being mentored by somebody else.
Yeah.
Excellent.
No, but I think it's absolutely the way to look at it. If you want to do better in engaging your customers, but then you fail on the back office, if I want to simplify it like that, or you fail on your innovation processes, it doesn't matter how good you are in digital marketing. If you don't get you won't get the full power of digital unless you go into processes, unless you go into employer experience and engagement. Because even if I take simple things like contact centers, if your employees are not able to respond to the conversation that's happening out there in the market these days and not able to control it in some given form, then you're basically not able to use digital marketing or any marketing effectively these days. So I like what you said. Digital marketing is actually dead, right? Because it's all about marketing these days.
So I must admit, I stole that from Mark Pritchard, the CMO of P&G. Who said that about 3 years ago at a large digital conference in Germany called Mexico. But it made quite an impact, and it makes a lot of sense.
It is.
So, all of this is interesting from the perspective of a billion-dollar company like Marico. I hope I haven't got the market cap wrong. Okay, so, but my question then, immediately everyone here is thinking, well, that's all very good, but what about us? Yeah. Right? And so coming to that, yes, I can read your minds. So from the perspective of, that question, and you saw the questions that came in, yes. So did I when Archana shared them. And I was like, okay, but how do we do it? Is it something that I can do? Or is it right for my size of company? Or I don't have the resources to spend on this partner, that partner? Let's just dive into it. How would you look at it if you were to advise a group of, say, smaller business entrepreneurs?
So I think actually the one thing that digital has also done for us, it democratizes a lot of things. So it's great to be a big company, and a lot of people say big is the next big thing, but it's also good to be small. So what do I mean with that is, and we come from a very big company, so maybe if I can just do about 90 seconds of why I'm sitting here when we talk about digital marketing, because many of you will know Accenture as a brand. You will know them for technology, but what you may not know is that we are also the largest global digital agency. So we have now second year in a row, according to Ad Age, which is the publication for the industry that you're well aware of, received the title of being not just slightly ahead, but by far the largest digital agency. Why? Because they count the analytics, the consumer insight piece, they count the content pieces, they count the outbound, they count everything into it, including the creative. So we have probably in the digital space, out of our 400,000 workforce, we're probably about 60,000 people that are just dedicated on digital. And we have more than 10,000 people of those just focusing on content production globally. Why? Because we serve both very big clients in driving content and conversation. And content production is anything from video production to Instagram feeds, to tweets, to updating content on your websites, on any channel that you engage on, all the way down to digital signage, because a lot of the billboards are also not as static anymore, so you have to react in real time. So I think what has changed is, in the past, it would have been a big investment to try and reach people. You always had that traditional equation of cost per mil. So I have to pay to reach 1,000 people with the same message. And if the message doesn't hit, then I've spent a lot of money, but I get nothing in return. Today, I can go almost into a one-to-one conversation, very personalized. I can use cloud-based platforms such as Salesforce, Adobe Marketing Clouds to have a real, what we call intimate conversation, and to get the feedback in real time. So I think that has really changed.
Hugely, and I think, to just to add to Nils' description of what Accenture is doing, this is coming from the communication space where I operate, which is, the advertising agencies, that world. They're actually pretty scared of what these guys are doing, right? Because as marketing and technology start to converge, they're looking at it and saying, look, we have as much of a legitimate claim over where this is headed as those guys, maybe even more, right? So these guys are, and whether it's them or firms like Deloitte, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a very interesting trend going on.
And I think the thing that we do see, and this is very much picking up on your point, the world evolves so quickly. 2-3 years ago, we did not really have a creative capability. So we said, then our clients came to us and said, you also need to innovate yourself a little bit, because we are struggling with the handover of creative, then into the real content production, into the content management, and then into all of our processes. So how can we speed up that process? So we started acquiring that capability. So we have we bought a year ago 650 man and women agency in Japan. We've acquired 3 or 4 companies in Australia. We haven't done anything in India yet, so that's still on my to-do list somehow. And we haven't acquired anything in Southeast Asia, but in Hong Kong we have 450 people in what we call a digital studio. So we are evolving our business models constantly because we need to also be there for our clients. And I think the big discussion that we always have, and I've got a lot of sympathy for the more traditional advertising space that Roopak was coming from many years ago. So Ogilvy is one of those joint stations that we have somewhere many years ago, so a lot of the agencies have not been able to keep up with that because they have been focused very much just on building brands and driving a brand, but they have not been good and effective at driving experiences. And so today, and I think that's the big benefit that you have both at a big company and a small company, if you can create an experience, if you can create a story around your brand, it's a lot easier to get it out there. It's not about having to spend millions and millions for the Super Bowl ads and the equivalent, but it's really about creating a real-time conversation and the experience around that.
Precisely, and I think that's perfectly relevant to every single one of you over here, which is when you ask that question, how do I get started and how is this relevant to me? What's your story? Right? And that's a great way to think about it in very simple terms. What's my story? What do I want to tell? Right? And then you go about it. Because digital marketing is not just about, spending some money on some ads and, it's marketing, it's brand building, it's storytelling, it's experiences, it's all of that together, right? So think about it that way. Now, if that were the starting point for me, so let's say I'm somebody who has a company which is doing, and thankfully, Nils, having dealt with India a fair amount, is very familiar with our very strange concepts of lakhs and crores, which the rest of the world doesn't really usually understand. So I'll talk in that.
I still use a calculator every once in a while.
So let's say I'm a company, 4 years of existence, I'm doing a revenue of 15 crores and I'm in specialized, let's say I'm creating something in the nutrition space, and I've never done any of this before. I've just about perhaps done some kind of trade marketing, and I am selling, I have both B2C and B2B, and it's a bit of a mixed thing. How do I even go about starting with the thought process? What should I keep in mind? How should I even start the journey of thinking whether this is for me or not?
Well, I mean, in the end, it comes back to the basics, right? Do I need to create awareness? Do I need to do acquisition of consumers? Or do I need to be more visible on e-tailing platforms that are already out there? Because I don't have to build my own necessarily. I can do some D2C, direct to consumer, but most of the time I will use the e-tailing platforms. Or do I need to be in store? So I think in today's world, and this is where, and you see it here every day, why is Unilever suffering so much in the Indian market? I think they always used to have 30+% market share in a lot of the categories, right? Just because they said, okay, we're a big company, we're going to buy shelf space, we're going to do our traditional trade marketing, we're going to do some branding exercise, and then our products will sell out. Today, that is no longer the only recipe for success. It might even be a recipe for disaster, because you have a lot of small companies coming in and saying, I've got a great brand, maybe I just need to find one spokesperson to help me, what we call the key opinion leader, or somebody who will go out there and talk about it. That's fantastic. If I don't have that individual, I just need to kind of pick my battles and say, now what do I need to do? Do I need to build awareness for my brand? And if so, where? Do I need to be able to tell a story, or do I just need to focus on the benefits? And then, depending on what the right approach might be, and then there's probably 5 ways to reach Rome in this case, or 1,000 ways to reach Rome. You would focus initially on a couple of platforms rather than going big. A few years ago, a similar conference that Roopak was mentioning, and there's plenty of them everywhere these days, I met the head of e-commerce for Unilever. Very smart guy, fantastic personality, and he said, the biggest problem that I have these days is that my world has completely turned around. In the past, success would be measured based on Nielsen data. So I would go and I would have, let's say, 30 hair care products on shelf, 30 consumer facings basically, out of 300 or 400. So let's say I had about 10-12% of the facings. I maybe had 30% market share, and I could pat myself on the back and I could tell my marketing director how great you're doing, because we were winning in the Nielsen environment. Today, if I look at Amazon, if I look at Flipkart, Big Basket, there's 12,000 hair care products out there. I don't have 30 maybe I have 60, 70, maybe I have 100, I have my entire range. but my market share may be 2 or 3%. So
Right.
what's the new reality, right? So I can become big just by selling in online channels. And you see it also in the Ayurveda space. It's not just the traditional ones. If I'm a personality and if I can get the message about my toothpaste out there, all of a sudden I'm making big money almost out of nowhere. Using very much, I would say, standardized techniques these days. I can use social, but I can also just use marketing clouds to push the messages in those channels that I'm on.
Right. And I think one of the questions, actually, if you think about it, you're saying, fine, it's really easy to get into it. And then there's the fear that, what if I mess it up? Okay. And I think that's the good part, which Nils was referring to earlier. It's not like you just package it and then you put the campaign out and then it doesn't work and you're finished and you have no money left in the bank. You iterate every day. And I think, that's, I think, one of the biggest benefits of digital marketing is that there's a constant feedback loop.
Yes.
Right?
And that's where the analytics becomes so important because, I mean, in the digital marketing space in the past, we would have to rely on everybody in this room. We would say, everybody gets a free coffee and a free water, and we're going to sit here behind a mirror, and we're going to look at you, looking at the ads that we created, and we're going to say, okay, do you understand the brand messages that we're getting out? And then at some point we would be satisfied because there would be 2 or 3 opinion leaders in that room who would say, oh yeah, it's the best ever, and it's fantastic, and the bottle needs to be exactly looking like this, and the only way you could check it, if it's true or not, is by putting it into the market and then hoping that whatever happened in that room behind the mirror would actually be true, right? And in today's world, you're constantly iterating. You have maybe 100 different versions of a marketing module out there. It can be a banner, it can be content on Pinterest, on whatever platform, and you can constantly check and see what's going on. And I think that's the beauty of today's world, that it's no longer about the biggest will automatically win, but it's about understanding your consumer, having the right ideas of what you want to present, and then telling those stories.
Yeah. And this kind of goes very smoothly into this whole question of B2B, B2C as well, right? I mean, is it relevant to everyone? Is it relevant to all categories? I mean, clearly, if you look at the Indian market, FMCG is one of the lowest spenders in terms of percentage of, I think 5% of marketing budgets on the average for FMCG goes towards digital marketing. In categories like automotive and banking, financial services, etc., that number is close to 50% or moving there, right? And I know, excuse me, I know at the same time there are anomalies. I know a brand that we worked with, which is an FMCG brand belonging to a large, say a competitor of Marico's, where they put 85% of their spend on digital. So anything can happen really, right? It all depends on what your objectives are, who your consumer is, who your audience is, and what exactly you're trying to achieve. I think, one of the questions, and I think bringing the B2B and the B2C side is one question from that side, and then also if you look at it from the perspective of, you might not be talking to the urban Indian consumer. Okay, if you might have people who are speaking different languages in small towns and villages, etc. How does that actually then percolate, and is it really that relevant, or does it still make sense to do a different kind of marketing or different kind of channel? Harsh, for you, when you look at, because Marico, there are a lot of products which are catering to quite a large sort of lower SEC kind of audience.
Yes.
The question then being, I mean, is digital even relevant if you look at it that way?
See, you're right. I think some of our brands, especially Parachute coconut oil, goes down to the village level of 500 people, 1,000 people population, and to that extent less relevant compared to some other brands which are high involvement category brands, where the involvement is high, the consumer is constantly trying to seek more information about not only the brand but what the brand can do. For example, a brand like Sooperfly, we expand our reach to not just saying that we are selling a product for heart care, but overall, how do you take care of your heart? And we try and give advice to the consumer in terms of whether it's diet or exercise and things like that. So that's far more interactive compared to a brand like Parachute. So you have to actually cut the cloth depending on what is your target segment. But not to say that we have to ignore Parachute, because I think it's a matter of time in the rural areas also. People are going to get digital, and with all this mobile evolution and all that, it's just, I think you have to start sowing seeds, even if you think that at this stage it may not be fully relevant, because you will never know when all of a sudden there is going to be a spike in the digital wave even in the rural areas or at the bottom of the pyramid.
Right.
So I think that's one. Another point I wanted to make was we thought, and FMCG, not only we, but FMCG industry thought that all of us have a big barrier to competition because of our distribution. And physically to distribute products, and some of the products go to more than 3 million outlets, but is so expensive that you need a certain critical mass to build an FMCG business. And anything below that critical mass, you just cannot get that reach in the retail space. And then the cost of reaching the retail is also very high. But since this whole digital marketing is taken over, we are seeing an emergence of many competitors in the digital space where they don't need to physically distribute. And there have been umpteen number of brands, one of them we've made investment in Beardo, which have actually been built without going to the shops.
It's a great brand, by the way. I
Yeah.
used to have a beard, I was using it.
Thank you. But there are so many other brands which have just been built on, and Nykaa and sort of other players are actually supporting this, and you can actually build a brand without going into physical distribution. So the whole ball game has changed. So the entry barrier of distribution, which we thought we had, is gone now.
And I think that's the beauty of devices like this, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
so if you want to reach someone in the rural areas, you don't have to reach every consumer. I mean, it's a little bit going back to mail order days. If you had 1 or 2 people in a village that would take the orders, that would then organize it for you, and you had somebody telling the right stories, that's all you really need, right? So we see it not so much in India, but in China, where WeChat has become a very dominant channel. So WeChat is it's the powerhouse of digital these
It's almost
days.
become the internet of China, right?
It's like the
Yeah.
internet of China. But what you see is, if you are like in the baby nutrition space, you may find that you have up to 4,000 individuals selling your product on WeChat without you knowing it, or with you knowing it but not influencing it. It's a great opportunity because that means there's actually people going somewhere, buying that product to make it available to others. But if you're in a space like that, and your hard product, I think, is very much qualifies for that, but even the skin creams and all that,
Yes.
you want to have the right messages come, right? You don't want to have the World Health Organization pointing a finger and saying, company so-and-so, you are promoting bad practices because you're selling a product as a substitute to breast milk in that particular case. You want to have a way to reach that consumer. So if you now have a marketing platform where you can influence that individual that's selling that, if you can make it easier for that individual to source your product, if you have then maybe 1 or 2 drop points, if you can create a loyalty program almost for that individual, then you have a completely new way of reaching a channel. And that
Right.
is then what digital marketing is all about. So yes, it's creating the awareness with the consumers, but at the same time it's also creating the channel to really serve those consumers in a more effective way. And that could be that B2B to C type of play where you have consumers actually doing it on your behalf.
Yeah, and I think you have to really adapt to the context. So, and also alluding to my earlier point that digital marketing is not something that lives by itself. It's all marketing, and you have to think a little bit in an agile fashion. So, I think Unilever had a beautiful example of how they actually managed to penetrate media dark areas in Bihar and Jharkhand through a campaign called Kaan Khajura Tation, where they actually created a medium. So they didn't know how to reach these people. There was no media there, and so they actually sent SMSs saying, send a give a missed call to this number, and you'll get a call back with 15 minutes of content, music or segments from a film, etc. And so they did it, and you call and you listen, and in that 15 minutes you'll have 2 wheel ads, one some other brand Lifebuoy ad, etc., and there they created media for free. So you have to think a little bit about the audience, and it's phenomenal, right?
And it's great. I mean, look at companies like P&G. So they started the soap opera in the
Exactly.
1930s. Why was it called the soap opera? Because they needed something on radio where people listened so that they could push their message around soap products, right?
Yeah.
So the soap opera was born. Then in the 1960s, 1970s, they started talking about Casual Friday. Why? Because they knew that if I have a suit, I need to take it to the dry cleaner. If I'm wearing khakis or jeans, I can wash them myself. So the way to get people to wash their pants more often is to have them wear them more often. So Casual Friday was born. So they always had some way to influence what's going on there. And I think this sounds very much the same, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Just using a mass media a new mass media to make it happen.
Yeah, exactly. So coming back to the point of, say you're in the, I think it's quite obvious in a certain way how to tell a story to a consumer base, right, which is B2C. I think the question from a B2B perspective, and bear in mind, we're not talking about perhaps the size of clients that you might be working with, but people in this room or smaller, which is you are in a specialized industry. I think someone asked the question, I have an engineering firm where we supply engineering products to the pharma industry, for example. How is this going to be relevant to me? Why should I even look at digital marketing? How's it going to help me?
So my perspective on that is, so I always like, somebody from Boeing said a couple of years ago, B2B doesn't have to mean boring to boring. Just because we're in a business environment doesn't mean we can't have fun, right? And what we talk about these days a lot is something called the concept of liquid expectations. So what are liquid expectations? Liquid expectations means because I am used to certain experiences that I have around me in my life. I'm used to, I'm privileged to be here for the first time. So I had a car from the hotel take me, and at some point the driver asked, do you have GPS and Google on here? I said, of course I do. So let me type in Grand Palladium. Obviously that was even more effective than the driver calling a friend saying, I'm looking for this, who said he knew more or less the area. So Google is in many cases now telling me how far away am I, what time do I need to leave my house or my office to reach a meeting, or what else is happening.
And did she have an Indian accent?
No.
No, she's changed.
I didn't put the sound on. I didn't put the sound on. I'll do that later on.
So it just happened.
I'll try that later on. It's fantastic.
The American woman has left. We now have an Indian woman.
And that's a liquid expectation, right? Because so if Amazon and Flipkart can deliver within 24 hours to me, I expect the same, right? If I'm using a whatever smartphone of your choice and its apps and all of that, and now I have a very difficult way to do my ordering in a B2B world, I'm disappointed. So whatever experiences I have in my personal life or in my life overall, and it's hard sometimes to have the expectations have become very liquid. And so if I want to engage with Marico and if I want to do my ordering here, I want to have a decent ordering platform. I don't want to have to go through 5 different steps, then print out a paper, fax it somewhere, and then this or that. If you are an employee, and that's why I like your example of we have to change the HR experience. If I want to know how many days of leave I still have or certain payments that I still do, I don't want to have to fill out 10 forms and then wait 3 weeks for someone to come back, right? So liquid expectations have actually changed the way that we expect our business lives to also run. The type of devices that we have, but also the way that we engage.
Right.
So the same type of tactics, the same type of information, the same type of ways of doing it, and I think robotics, chatbots, all of that will become very standardized for us to engage, will be there as well. So I think the same type of marketing, the same type of experience that I want to create, if I want to have loyalty, if I want to have affinity in my B2B world, I need to be able to provide those same type of experiences.
No, precisely. Thank you. Because, as we were talking earlier, that guy, the CIO you're trying to target in that company or the head of procurement you're trying to target is also a sports fan, is also a parent, is also someone who goes on holidays, etc., etc. So don't forget they're a human being at the end of the day. And just because your message is a business message, although I'm not very fond of people reaching out to me on Facebook saying, can you give me a job, that, LinkedIn is the place for that. But, so you still have to get into a person's sort of human psyche at the end of the day, right? And I think that's
but it's exactly like you say. I mean, there's a different platform for different ways to engage. If we are able to respect those boundaries, and it's great when Achana brought us together. She said, let me just create a WhatsApp group. It's the easiest way for us to align, and then and it's the easiest way for us to communicate quickly, right? If you want to connect to somebody professionally, LinkedIn is a good place to do it, right? We use in our work life, we use a lot a function called Workplace, which used to be called Facebook at Work. So it's the same functionality that you're used to from Facebook, where more or less you want to keep it to your circle of friends, or most of us do, transport it into the business world. So instead of having to learn a new way to do messaging, to share videos, to create little communities. I can now do the same in an environment called Workplace. It runs behind my firewall, so I can even use it in China, which is the big benefit versus Facebook, right? So I can run it in my own environment, and I've got a perfectly good platform for myself to get my messages out and for my teams to communicate back. So we're using less and less of the email, and we're using more and more of those kind of things.
No, precisely. I was just saying earlier that I think I make like 1 or 2 calls in a day at the very most, and Nils was saying that's even more than me. Yeah. so the fact is that, you know, otherwise you call someone and like, okay, I'm in a meeting, can I call you back? Someone else, you know, it's very inefficient. And the fact is I've cut down my internal mail by 75%, and I've started doing most of my business on WhatsApp, especially WhatsApp with desktop, which makes it easy to type long messages, etc. Right? It's fluid. So all of that innovation actually, you know, just comes back to that, right? So liquid expectations in terms of you're doing this in all your life. So B2B, you know, content again, I think is a very, very important part of that entire journey of how you communicate B2B. And I think a few people had a few questions on how do you actually engage, and I think, you know, what we call what is content marketing in the first place? And this is something that, you know, because this is the space that we're in, so one of the definitions, my favorite definition of content marketing is traditional advertising and marketing is telling the world you're a rock star. Content marketing is showing them that you're one, right? So you don't have to shout out saying that, hey, look, this is not advertising. In the process of engaging with your audience, they kind of realize that, you know what, this company really knows what it's talking about. I think I want to work with them, right? So how do you see, you know, content marketing for you guys in terms of
It's definitely become one of our foci, because in the past, like you said, let's get a brand out there and let's get people to believe in what it is. Content marketing for me is very much personalizing that brand journey, and this is, I think, where the B2B part becomes particularly interesting, right? Especially if you're living in an environment or if you're doing business in an environment where the purchase cycles might be a bit longer and where you don't have a need or reason to engage on a weekly basis or multiple times during the week. How do you stay relevant? How do you stay on top? So a few years ago, I would have said content marketing was still a little bit confused with so I like what you said there with that, just getting that one message out, and we thought, fantastic, now I've got the email address, or I've got a way to send you a text message, or I've got different digital media to push messages to you. That was okay, but it was also wrong, because in the end, and I think one of the big marketing gurus from BBH, so Hogati, he said a few years ago, we believe now with digital, we have the right to push messages to you all the time without asking. And just because you gave me your email address doesn't mean you have to get 10 emails from me every day, every week, or whatever the frequency is. Just because you have my phone number doesn't mean that you should be WhatsApping me, going on LinkedIn and everything all the time. You still have to be concerned about you don't want to get into their space all the time, you only want to get into one space, and that's between the ears here. You need to be able to own that share of mind and to get the relevant messages in there. And these messages are constantly needing to get updated because you need to hyper-localize them. You need to make them relevant in the context of now, because depending on situations, both economically but also environmentally, politically, those messages might change. Those purchase cycles might change. You need to make them experiential and interesting. You need to bring the innovation elements into it. So there are a lot of elements that you need to do. So if I can create something what we call the customer genome, so taking all types of information is almost like trying to get a view of your DNA and how you think and what kind of preferences you have. If I can start to populate databases, building a little bit like what we call a customer genome, then I can start to really make those messages relevant and that content very relevant. And all of a sudden I've got building blocks of content that I want to somehow get to you in your preferred channel at a time when you want to pull that content. And this is where I like what Roopak said. It's much better not to call me but to send me a WhatsApp message, because then I can open it or respond when it's the right time for me, so there's less pressure. So how do I make it more of a pull? How do I make it, when I talk about personalizing, it's not about pushing it to you, but it's about allowing you to pull the right content in a seamless way.
Yeah, so I think content marketing, can come in various forms. It's applicable to B2C as well, B2B as well. I mean, if you take, let's say, a B2C example, probably the most successful example of content marketing is Red Bull, okay, which now is actually a media company that happens to sell liquid in a can. their media business is becoming bigger, right? And so there was a deliberate strategy. They know their audience, they know this is what they like, let's create this content, and the Red Bull brand becomes bigger. Now in the B2B space, how do you kind of contextualize that? And I think this leads to one of the questions of should the promoter be involved in digital marketing? How important is that? I'd say at a SME level of a firm for sure, because a lot of content marketing in the B2B space is really about thought leadership, right? About what you're laying in for you to gain that credibility. And if I look at even a larger context, if we look at what has happened here with say, Marico, and even though ASCENT is not a part of Marico, because through Harsh and him being the face of Marico, as the founder of Marico initially, and the values are still associated, and I think that ASCENT has actually managed to imbibe some of the values, whether it was deliberate or not, and I'm sure some of it was, but I think that it's a very it happens quite automatically, and the perception, because of say the Harsh Mariwala brand being the connector between Marico and ASCENT, a lot of those values kind of transfer, right? So I think that in terms of whether it was you speaking at places or writing articles or whatever it might be, I think that all adds to that innovation being that haloed kind of value that's associated with both. So just to kind of get a little bit of perspective on that, how deliberate was it?
No, actually it's not deliberate, but your mind is the same thing, whether you're running a business or you're running an ASCENT.
Right.
And what drives you in terms of your thoughts, your passions, are equally relevant to something like ASCENT as much as it is relevant to Marico. So I don't think I've segregated both in terms of what we should be doing, because ultimately you have to apply the same mind to all the different situations. So I think to that extent, I'm sure there is some rub-off in terms of what I have done. Maybe I think you can add a little bit more.
I think,
and they are also sitting in the same office, and they also interact with a lot of Mariconians. So it rubs off in terms of a culture. Also next to her is the lady who's running the Marico Innovation Foundation. Yeah. So I'm sure she listens a lot on that front also. So I think the fact that you're all together and at the same location and
have to be very
part of the same office, I think that also plays an important role.
Yes. Yeah, in terms of even heading the foundation for the last 2 years and having a completely new team, I didn't have to actually put an effort to build a culture for the foundation itself. It was seamlessly from Marico, whatever we're doing, and there's a lot of influence with the Marico association that we have, and we can't see it very separately that ways. Like Mukesh Kriplani helps me with identifying right speakers for different events, or an HR helps us with finding the right people for the foundation. So it kind of seamlessly comes into it. We didn't have to actually start completely something new.
Yeah.
There was no requirement as such.
Right.
Which is actually not a bad thing also when we talk about the marketing or the digital marketing. If you have those core values, it's just a question of how, and I don't have to have everything on the same, on every channel, but how do I use these different channels, how do I use different ways to still project those core values and to bring them to life. And in the past we were talking about, if I want to do something, I can use radio for this, I can use print to do that, and I can use television for everything, right? In today's world, and I don't know when's the last time that I watched a television ad, because if I watch television, it's either Kiddies TV that doesn't have that, or it's Netflix, and so I never see any advertisement anymore. So the only time that I will see a television ad is if it pops up on one of my digital channels, and television is also a digital channel, but it's difficult to reach me there, right? So I need to find other ways of communicating, of bringing those messages out, and so I think if you have strong core values that you can also then project onto other institutions in this case, or onto other brands, line extensions, that's a good starting foundation.
Yeah, no doubt. I think, that kind of leads us nicely into talking about content, because that's actually how you do it. And I would fine to talk about it theoretically, but at the end of the day, you're also thinking, okay, fine, I can do content marketing. How am I going to actually get down to creating it? How do I go about, am I equipped to either hire someone or create a video myself? What do I have to do to go about it? Do I write? Do I do this? Do I do that? So what's a framework perhaps to even start thinking about this as an SME who's never done this before?
So for me, and I'll share two of my favorite examples, and I don't know if they also worked well in India or not, but for me as a consumer also, I love both of these. So some of the two of the best ones I've seen recently is the one, the Star TV, which is basically, I'm a person, I want to watch when I want to watch, and where I want to watch. So it starts off with a couple of guys in a pub, and everybody wants to watch football, and then the video, the motion stops, and then the guy basically says, so everybody wants to do it, but I'm not everyone. I want to do what I want to do, right? And then you've got family and all that. So I thought they brought that whole concept of individual television experiences, streaming as a service type of thing, very well across. So the whole concept was so clear, and obviously it's a high-end production. It doesn't need to be so high-end, but the message was just so straightforward for me. Another one that I thought was really impressive is the Nike, the women's athletics ad that was, I think it's still going very viral. So it's the whole combination of saying, here we're going to do something to liberate women's athletics, and I may be over-interpreting, right? So this is my non-Indian view of the world, playing Missy Elliott music, who, for me, whenever I close my eyes I see Missy Elliott, it's always in a, and this is the only downside maybe because typically she wears an Adidas tracksuit and not a Nike one, but it's, so she may not be the most sportive woman, but she's always been associated with women speaking up, with the first woman in rap doing something new and different, and just seeing that whole thing. I mean, I thought it was just beautifully orchestrated. So the story that I'm telling there, the experience that I'm bringing across is I think a very positive one. So if you can center it around what is the main thing that I need to achieve in terms of experience and brand that I want to bring across, and is it more around acquisition or is it more about converting people? That's a little bit the way to start. And once we have understood what part of that journey you're on, then we can really start to build either a story around creating that awareness and finding, especially for smaller companies, maybe some lightweight and very flexible ways to project that, or then to really say, actually it's about me selling more and more of these. How can I now get these things into the baskets of Big Basket, Flipkart, Amazon, and wherever I want to have them, and into the physical world, and making sure that they really convert. So it's, but it all starts, I think, in the end is, what is the problem or what is the main business issue that I'm trying to solve here for? And then digital gives you so many options to make it happen.
Yeah, and if you notice, the word story came back, right? So again, that's a very, very important part of it. So one part is rationally to think about, what are my objectives, what do I want to achieve? And then the other part is a little bit more visceral. What's the story I want to tell? And you kind of, maybe you can imagine it. Maybe you can picture how you want your top 10 customers or your top 10 dream customers to think about your firm. But it's in your head. Nobody else knows. So how do you start to get there, really?
And if I may give an example, so this one's from Japan, and also a very visionary leader who's built a company from scratch, a company called Fast Retailing, Uniqlo. So Mr. Yanai is, I think he's 76 now. You said earlier, there's a certain age gap when it comes to digital, and but he also said, I want to use digital to do another $10 billion in revenue. So now we're not talking about smaller companies, but I think the example is still highly relevant. I want to do another $10 billion in revenue with that. So initially, a lot of companies came to him and said, here's an idea for a new website. Here's an idea for a new app to help you sell more there. And then we created a joint venture actually to make this happen. We said, it's not about one more channel, it's not about one more place to buy something, but it's about an entire experience. In the first year, 80% of what we did was about the employee experience. So how do we use digital devices to make life in store, to make life in trainings, to make the back office, all of that more seamless. Checking in and out of my schedules, doing training online. So why don't I use this device to allow you to do training? Because if I have better skilled employees in store, they will sell more, they're more successful, they stay longer, they have a different client conversation. How do I give them a real-time view of the inventory so they don't have to phone and ask, is that t-shirt still available in another downtown store, and how long will it take to get it here, etc., etc. Obviously, we engaged and we also changed the whole front-end experience, but that was maybe 20% of the work. But here's a visionary who said, I want to find a way to use these new technologies, to use analytics and insight, to use new ways of communicating with my employees, with the customer to really change the way my business works. And so he had that big vision, and then we broke it down into individual chunks, probably a little bit like you had the digital roadmap that you did with BCG. How do I break it down into workable pieces? And now we're doing things like, if anybody's on Facebook Messenger, Uniqlo IQ is a chatbot, which we call conversational commerce. So now we have a fantastic chatbot running on Facebook Messenger, which is a platform that a lot of the fans of Uniqlo are already on, where we get so much insight because you say, can I get red socks? And then it shows you the red socks that you can get. And then you ask other things. And then you ask for female products. You ask for kids products. So they start to understand exactly who I am. So the analytics behind it is amazing. But not just that, we give them now an easy way to order something if they want, but we link it all the way into the warehouse because all of the supply chain is now coming from it. So we're doing demand planning, we're doing understanding what the collection of the future should be looking like, all from one very simple chatbot. So, but the idea, the way that it started was behind it, right? So don't go out there and say, I'm going to do a chatbot to do something gimmicky, just to have one more way to people say, oh great, so-and-so company has now a chatbot, and then 2 weeks later, nobody looks at it anymore. Don't feel the urge to create an app if your brand is not relevant enough to be, and I always say, if you're not on page 1 or 2 of my screen, you're probably not highly relevant to me. So if you're not there, use other channels. Find the ways to make it seamless for the consumers to engage. Don't be afraid of partnering and sharing data also with others to drive those conversations, right? In today's world, it's easier to reach people, but it makes more fun, and it's better if it's part of an ecosystem in many cases.
Yeah, undoubtedly. And I think that on the point of apps, you know that 99% of apps never get opened more than once. Right? So imagine how much of wasted investment that actually is.
And that's the issue, right? So a lot of times we focus too much on what we would call vanity metrics.
Yeah.
How many likes do we have on Facebook? Does it really correlate to the success of my product? Not so often, right? So it's more about how can I use these channels to drive behavior, to drive engagement. So I always say it's difficult to change behavior of people, but it's easy to work with the behavior of people. So if we can understand how people are behaving, then we can tap into those conversations. But we don't have to try to force it.
I'm smiling because I could hear myself speaking. The vanity metrics bit and about moving the needle and all that. That's what we're talking about all the time. Because in India, what happens is when you have a market which is all about scale, then vanity metrics play in a big way, right? It's all about clicks and views, and even and again, I keep using the Unilever example because we work a lot with them, but even at an erudite marketer like Unilever, 2010, 11, okay, you had brand managers having water cooler conversations like how many fans do you have on your page, how many likes do you have, and that they'd forgotten about like the basics of market share and all of that, right? And now it's come a full circle and people are realizing that, okay, what's the point of all of this if it's not, in the best case, moving the needle on sales, but at least brand affinity, which will eventually lead to that. If it's not doing all of that, which is why for us in my second company, Sooperfly, we're focusing very strongly on deep metrics, what we're talking about, engagement in terms of how much time is the audience spending on our content and how many times are they coming back, not how many of them they are coming every month, which is becoming less relevant. Right?
Yeah. We don't talk that much about unique visitors anymore, right?
Yeah,
And it really doesn't matter if you have 1 million, 5 million, or 500 million fans on Facebook, because even Facebook, I think, will go less and less into saying, okay, we're 1.4 billion people, and so they needed that to do it, but now they're getting forced a lot more into, does it convert? Can you tell me that it's actually driving traffic into my stores? And are the people who are on Facebook not just pushing the button for like or a smiley face these days or whatever other options, but is there something coming out of it, right?
No, exactly.
And they will have to go a lot more to the value based, and that has and that's where Facebook even knows we can't do it alone. We need to work with agencies, we need to work with physical outlets, we need to work with the brands in a different way than just to say, oh, I gave you 1 million likes and now give me 1 million whatever currency because you said you're going to do a cost per mil game.
So I think one of the questions was, should we outsource social media or should we do it in-house? And that's a question that a lot of people grapple with, and the vast majority of large advertisers outsource that stuff. I personally, and I'll ask Nils and Harsh also what he feels about it, but my personal perspective is, once a company, you may not have the competence in the beginning, you may need someone to help you, but social media is something that should actually be in-house. other stuff. You need help on analytics, you need help on things like that, but social is your voice, and I think authenticity is the strongest factor that determines your success in that, right? So I don't know, Harsh, do you have a view on that per se?
So I think it depends on the size of the organization and the kind of spends one has in terms of ad spends or social media spends. But clearly, yes, if you are large enough, then you need to have not only in-house but dedicated one or two individuals who are only looking at that part rather than not trying to look at too many things. Because I think what social media or digital enables FMCG companies is that in the earlier days, when digital was not present, the ad budgets required to be present. There was so much wastage on television, press, and you were not able to reach your target segment. But now what this enables is you can actually reach your target segment. You can work with a much smaller budget. You don't need to advertise mass media now. My son is promoting a brand. He's there. Maybe he can talk a little bit more about. But all his new brand investment is going into social media and digital, nothing else. And maybe a little bit of PR, but no mass advertising.
Yes.
Because he's looking at a very niche customer which he can reach through this and not through the mass medium. But yeah, I think a lot of thought, to answer your question, a lot of thought has to come from internally. And there may be some learning curve. There will be learning curve if you are new. But I see also the need to be in touch with some consultant or some other firm which can provide you in terms of what are the developments. But I think the ownership and accountability of this has to come from within.
I think there's no doubt about it in terms of you need that expertise, and I'm actually as the founder of a company that gets a significant amount of its revenue from social media, I'm actually saying that companies should take it in-house, but you should always come to people like us to help you with it. What do you say?
No, I think it's a very valid point, because what I've seen, and I've been in the region about 4 years now, and interestingly enough, I've had clients come to me and say, Nils, we need to gain control of our social media channels again. And then you say, so what's the issue? And they say, actually, we don't have social media channels, but we are on YouTube, we're on Facebook, we're on all of these platforms, and it's our employees who are posting content. So in that case, they're actually lucky, because you have employees who are so passionate that they say, I want to spend some of my free time to talk about how great my company is or my brand is, right? But if you then look at it, and if you're a marketeer, it looks completely crazy, right? It's complete havoc. So it's not necessarily the messages you want to get across. It's not very consistent. It's not the material that you want to share. It could even be damaging without that employee wanting to do bad. He or she means well, but not so much, right? So rather take those individuals, give them the purpose, make them either part of a group that manages it with some professionals like your company, or you have 2 or 3 people maybe in-house, augmented by or supported by an agency. But it's fantastic to see these days employees also want to engage, right? So your best employees are the ones who want to post, who want to be part of that, right? Because they see their children doing it, they see their friends doing it, they see their neighbors doing it. So you have to also provide those channels. I think not just for the sake of going out there, but also for the sake of having a great employee experience. I think from a content product perspective, you need to continue to drive at least what kind of messaging it is. You need to be able to create also those briefs for the agency. You probably need to co-locate. So we do a lot of co-location these days to say we need to sit in the same room to make this happen. We are one team in that case. We're just there to augment and to add additional people in peak or to take out people. So we're the flexible element of it. So I think that's the way that we can look at as our role as the agency. And we're the ones to make sure that you don't miss any trends. Because especially on technology, in the past, the first conversation would have been, okay, now I've got 1 person or 2 people looking after it. What technology do they need to buy? What licenses do they need to require? What do they need to do here? Today, a lot of this is subscription as based. It's as a service based. It's highly flexible. It's adding additional capacity or taking capacity out. So you don't have to worry too much about the technology component anymore. I would rather just say, so some of our clients are saying, and I don't see a socket here. They're concerned about one thing. They're concerned about that 120 years ago, a lot of companies went bankrupt because they felt the need to create electricity, because that was at the advent of electricity going everywhere, and people said, for us to have a competitive advantage, we need electricity. We need to have it in-house, because otherwise, who knows what's going to happen. And then a lot of companies invested a lot of money into electricity. Today, or a few years ago, a lot of companies said, we need to have these big server parks. We need to have all of these technology things in-house, because otherwise we're not independent. But that reality has changed completely. Today, you don't need a lot of that. You actually just need to be flexible. You need to be in the cloud. So you don't need to lock yourself in for the next 10 years to say, I'm just going to do Salesforce, I'm just going to do Adobe, or I'm just going to do Microsoft, or whatever other solution. It doesn't really matter. You want to be able to flexibly change the solution based on what type of technology is winning the market. So I think the pressure is a lot more on the technology companies to provide the right solutions for you at the amount of intensity that you require, rather than the other way around. So that's why there's a role for technology / services advisory in your house, but the core of the content, the core of the messaging, I think you still need to own to make sure that the heart and soul of your company is the one that gets projected.
Right. Okay, so we've crossed a little bit more than an hour's time. I think what we'll do is I'm going to just touch upon video for a bit, because that's something that sometimes can be worth demystifying, because people get intimidated by it. Seems like such a process, right? That's one, and then we'll spend a few minutes on ROI, spend, investment, how do you know you're successful, etc., and then we'll take a break. And anything we've not covered, then we'll cover in the question and answer sessions. Video. Okay, so for me, if I can just set the context, I started my company in 2006 as a TV commercials production company, right? And we've done everything from a small budget, which was at that time, 10-15 lakhs was a small budget, and then you went up to, brands like L'Oreal, who spend 3.5 to 4 crores on a hair care commercial. And those still exist, but the world has changed completely. Video has become democratized. This is an era where brands are producing hundreds of pieces of content as opposed to 5 TV commercials a year, and it requires a completely different approach. Luckily, technology has also changed, allowing you to do it for much leaner and cheaper, etc., etc. And we are back to the 15 and 10 lakh and even less kind of pieces of content becoming highly prevalent, right? And I've seen that kind of content has gone up by a factor of 10x in the past 2 years alone in the industry, right? Which also speaks for something. I think that because the shelf life has gone down, it only makes sense that it can make sense for people to do if it is of a lower cost. So in terms of, I think from a, and I don't know, maybe this is something that is, you're not really involved in the day-to-day running of Marico anymore, but is there something that has been discussed perhaps at a board level, or is this something that has been taken note of, or you guys are looking at in a perspective, from a certain perspective? Harsh?
I don't think this has been discussed in such detail at the board level.
Right.
But just one or two things which occurred to me as you were speaking was that we have started what is we call Facebook at work, right?
Right.
I think that has been a big hit in the amongst the employees,
Right.
The workplace.
and maybe you can, Mukesh, can you share a little bit more about it and what it has done?
Workplace is actually using us to engage within the company and hence collaborate internally. So the other videos that you were saying, which is exactly like it is making it cheaper and all that. So there are certain brands, because of their scale, they are not able to spend a lot of money also. Parachute body lotion, for example, recently running video campaigns through hashtag confident in my skin, and that gets a lot of impressions and all that.
I think it got a lot of hits and it was done at almost a minimal cost, right?
Yeah, that was because the brand can't afford that much, the traditional advertising spend and all that. So that's going completely different.
And I think the overall quality was quite good from what I saw yesterday. It's good quality.
Response that you get, and then if it gets viral, it was trending at number 5 in Twitter in the last few days.
Yeah.
So if it becomes viral and all that, so then
So the joke in the production industry is, what's the definition of a digital film? When a client wants to do an 80 lakh film for 8 lakhs and then wants to put it on air after that. Right. No, but in all seriousness, yes, I think it is possible to do these things, and also anything within reason. Something that you can produce for 2 crores can also be produced for 20 lakhs. It's just that it's going to look a little bit different, but you know what?
Yeah.
That's okay. Why spend that extra money? For some brands, now you can imagine a L'Oreal, for example, for whom it's all about celebrity hair and red carpet, they're going to spend that extra bit. For most other brands, it doesn't matter. So, Nils, how's the evolution of video you've seen, so in whether it's in India or in the region, the uptake on that in the past 2 years especially?
I think almost everything that's successful these days has video as a part of it, right? And that can be anything from 5 to 10 seconds to longer ones. Because I mean, often we get concerned about I think we get too concerned about having to do the next big video that gets 2 million, 5 million, whatever hits, right? I'm much more of your opinion and say, if I can do something for a targeted audience that's relevant and that gets the message across, spend a little bit. You can create, I mean, we do it a lot in our client presentations these days. We connect this thing to a tripod. The sound quality is not the best. In good cases, we'll put a microphone on somebody. Yeah. The lighting is not always optimal, but seeing real people talk about real products still seems to be highly relevant these days. And now you actually have production companies trying to make it look a bit more low end to give it credibility, rather than always saying it has to be glamorous, right? So no matter what device, and obviously this is where technology has helped us, video has become very much a big part of the journey. And if I look at it over the last couple of years, moving from 2G networks to 4G networks here in India, just what's possible these days to do real time. And 3 years ago, I was blown away what we did here with one of our clients. 15 million people streaming cricket simultaneously. So this was bigger than Super Bowl streaming at the time on a 2G network. Fantastic, right? And once you have people consuming like that, I mean, I see there's certain demographics that are a lot easier to reach using a video than using written word or just sound, right? If I look at corporate social responsibility areas where we use video these days, is to reach nurses in areas that normally don't get the level of education. So they will call in and they will ask a question, and then worked content as forms of video, or in some cases audio if the connection is really bad, but in many cases it's now video, comes through to give them education. So I'm looking at it not from an advertising perspective, but just at how far the technology has come, right? And that's why we are basically, even in every one of our offices that we're renovating these days, we have video production rooms. So it's just looking at one of the new floors that we opened in Singapore. Yesterday I was showing it. So we've got 3 or 4 different backdrops coming down, from the traditional green screen to other backdrops. We produce it 24/7. So somebody in the world in one of our offices will be able to link in, so that any one of our employees can go in there and create a video in a professional ways, because there is a producer somewhere doing it. So you don't even have to have your own teams anymore, which is why I'm telling that story, because it means no matter how big your business is, it's not about hiring that big film team, flying to some beautiful resort to get the best lighting and this or that, but it's really about telling a credible story and bringing it to life in a nice way.
That's where I think your earlier question was, to what extent should we manage internally?
Yes.
With the internal insight, the external person will not be able to get. So a lot of the content, the insights have to come from within the organization.
Exactly.
Then you can translate. If I can tell him, okay, can you translate that into a good video? Yes. So, but a lot of it has to come from within the organization.
And we see it a little bit. Obviously we measure. We do a lot of. So we use probably 10 to 12 different tools like BrandWatch to see what's happening for the different brands. So Radian, and so I mean, there's so many different tools. I wouldn't recommend one or the other. But if you're tracking what's being done on social media channels, it's sometimes quite interesting, because in some cases you will have paid a key opinion leader to produce a video that then goes on Instagram. And in some cases it's great because that individual really loves the brand and does a good case. In other cases it's actually the worst thing that can happen, because that person may be famous, but it's so obvious that he's not or she's not into it that it's a chaos. But if you can produce some of these on your own to get them out in the relevant channels, you're much better in managing that conversation.
I think the key word that's linking it all together is authenticity, right? And that if the message has to be authentic, the vibe has to be authentic, your thinking has to be authentic. You can't. It's you know what? Actually, it's very hard to fool people on social, very hard.
Yeah.
They can see right through it, because especially younger audiences, they cut through the bullshit very, very easily. So, and that's where the world, I mean, they're going to be the largest share of our audience very soon. But I think coming back to, you were talking about the tools, Radian, etc., etc. I think this is a great segue into measurability, right? And how do you actually know? And then we can sort of, from there go into how do you know how much to spend, etc. Or perhaps we should actually tackle that first, right? Let's talk about that actually. Okay, so again, take the example of somebody who runs a business which has been existing for about 4 years in the food and nutrition space, 15 crores top line. I want to get into digital marketing. How much money do I actually allocate? How do I even know what framework to look at? I mean, not the answer. Not the answer.
To someone from strategy.
But how would I even begin to know whether, can I like take 2 lakhs and put it there, or do I need to put 10 lakhs there, or how do I begin?
I think this is where the biggest mind shift has happened at all sizes of companies, right? So I've worked a lot in, so 10 years ago the topic of marketing ROI was a big one, and I was working for McKinsey at the time, so more of a strategy consultancy, and we did a lot of work there that was so successful that at some point the agencies even went out and took out double-page ads in newspapers saying don't let strategy houses do your advertising spend.com. So it was really you have to believe us that we're doing better, said the agency, than putting some tools to it. But at the time, a lot of companies had this: we're going to spend 33% of our revenue on advertising. That seemed to be good practice at the time. And then you said, either I'm going to use that 33% to move the needle upwards and to get a lot more bang for the buck, or I'm going to say, I want to sell the same 1 billion, but now I want to do it with a little bit less, right? So there was only 2 ways to go. And I think that mindset has changed a lot in today's world. A lot more has become what we would call zero-based. So let me not automatically say I own the company and you as a CMO get 33% of the revenue, and it's going to be the same all the time. You have now, and this has changed also 10 years ago, because 10 years ago as a CMO I couldn't really prove as much, so I could bask in the sun in Cannes, which was just happening. No, it just happened last week, right? The film festival.
Next week. Next week. The ad fest.
The ad fest. So you get the Golden Lion and whatever. So if you were a good agency and you were a good CMO, then you would fly there, and you still fly there, and you would get a nice prize, and you would be walking the red carpet, and you would be a rock star, to bring it back to what we were talking about earlier. In today's world, the CEO and the owner of the company won't say, oh, that's great, you got this line, but what actually happened to my brand, right? And what happened to my sales? So there's it's a completely different mindset. So in the past, the CMO would be taken in many cases, a lot less seriously, because all he had to show for was creativity. Today, the CMO can actually link it back to engagement levels, to net promoter scores, to sell out, because you can do it very regionally, and you can say, this is what I did in, let's say, Lower Perel, and this is what happened, and this is what I did in Santa Cruz, and this is what happened. So you can almost you can draw much better direct conclusion of the success of it, which also means as a CMO now I have to prove what I did. So the term measurability has finally become that's become a lot more true. I can now link let's say payment data, especially in the digital payment space, to engagement levels, to did I open a message or not, was I able to see it, and to what happened. So the whole topic of conversion is finally becoming one that's becoming more measurable. We're not fully there yet, but I would say it's getting a lot more there. So now the way that I have to build my budget when I'm a marketeer, I often have to do it zero-based. I have to say, okay, which brands am I pushing more this year? What brands might my competitors be pushing? So what are some of the areas that I need to hit? So I need to look at it a little bit offensive and defensive at the same time, but I need to almost justify every rupiah that I'm going to put out there, for which channel and all that. And in the past, it was always the agency saying, it's about gross rate points, it's about opportunities to see, opportunities to hear. A lot of that has gone away, and has become really now justifiable.
So I think in terms of also what's happened is, if you ask okay, how much do I spend? There's no right answer to that, obviously. The right answer is how much can you spend, but more importantly, what will you get out of it, right? Now, if you look at the context of, you look at what you're spending on and you break it down. Let's say you want to outsource your social media to an external agency. As a small company, you can probably get someone for about, I would not recommend getting on board an agency who you're paying less than $1 lakh a month for retainer, right? And so you should budget 12 lakhs, because it used to be you could get someone decent for 75,000 whatever, and even less, but I'd say $1 lakh a month for quality, right? For small, not too much work. That's one. The second bit is that the world is no longer organic. Okay, so in 2011 we created the phenomenon called Colaveri, and we did it by spending 0 rupees. Today you can't do that. Okay, there is no organic traction. You can if your content is great, you can allow your content to coast much further with a little bit of spend, but you should allocate a little bit of media spend, paid media budget for sure, because that allows you to actually be able to do that depending on your messaging. However, if you're doing content marketing, you can approach it in a slightly different way. So again, there's no right answer. I would say that if you can afford to allocate, say, 50 lakhs for the year, you can get a great amount of return on investment for that if you spend it wisely. If it's less than that, but I mean, there is no right amount. Even 5 or 10 lakhs can really help to do what you
and what's interesting, because there were 1 or 2 questions around, I'm a small family business, I can't afford to have a creative agency, content production, maybe a website production, a branding partner, a trade marketing partner, etc., etc. And I would say probably yes, you can, because we're living in a world where the concept of digital decoupling is becoming bigger and bigger. So what do we mean with digital decoupling? In the past, I would have to go to one agency and say, you're going to design my website for me, you're going to design all, 1,500 links to it and pages that are underneath it, and you're going to produce it and you're going to run it. In today's world, I can decouple each and every one of those, right? I can say, maybe I want to have 1 or 2 people in-house working maybe with a consultancy to create what's the right customer experience that I want to create, which will then get translated into journeys that I want to create on the web and in other channels, on my other platforms. Then I get a creative house maybe to design it for me, and then I get a production company to do it at a much lower price point, right? So you've got different countries in the world right now fighting a little bit for who's going to be the production house of the future. So what used to be the call center, I would say, is now going into the digital production and digital run type of thing. And the same holds true for other things, right? So it's not one agency. So yes, there is still the concept of agency of record, and in some cases, a few years ago, I would have said we will never be an agency of record. We are now the agency of record for a couple of places, so that's how we always evolve, right? So it's good to revisit it every few months or years, but you don't have to be dependent on one anymore. You can decouple it but once again, you need to know what you want, because otherwise the decoupling actually just adds to the pain and doesn't give you the efficiencies that it might if you're very clear on what you're bringing to life.
Yeah, even that bit about the design, things like 99 Designs, and there's a bunch of sites. Everything can be done online. If you really want to kind of get the obviously you'll have to work a lot harder, right? So you'll have to manage a lot of things yourself, etc. It's it depends on how small your budget is, how valuable your time is, etc. But you can get it done. You can start off. In terms of, I think one last discussion, and then we'll take a break. In terms of the measurability bit, again, we were talking about, right? So, in terms of specific metrics, how do you go about, say, what are some of the metrics that one would use as a small business to know, like just, rather than complicating it, let's say 3 things that I can set as benchmarks depending on my industry, etc. But how would I actually approach that specific metrics?
So on the one hand, I always like to see the direct effect. So if you are going through direct channels, meaning e-tailers or something, there's a lot that you can track around, obviously, my on-platform and my off-platform marketing spend. What is the name of the game when I'm selling on, let's say, a Flipkart? It is getting people, if they search for a product, to go onto that Flipkart landing page that I've been creating, to get them into the basket and to get them to convert. So there's 3 steps that I basically need to measure there, right? That's relatively simple because I want to be effective at my off-platform, so using Google and all the other search areas, or acquiring them on other platforms like Pinterest, any website, to get them on platform, which in that case would be the Flipkart, to get them into a basket. And in an ideal world, I would be paying for each of those steps, because I would be saying, okay, I will only pay you if somebody actually engages with my brand on off platform, meaning on wherever I acquire them. Then I will pay people to do the different clicks or going through that journey on there, right? So that's a relatively easy one to do, because then I can have a direct correlation of doing it. But it's not always just about converting baskets. It's also about obviously brand building, and there we are still a little bit more in the traditional space. There it is about how many people react to it, how many people will share it, how many people will do, and this is where I like to have elements of gamification in there, or I like to have a way for people to react. So it's not just a big, actually it's good that you asked how many times have you clicked on a banner recently, right? So it's probably 5, 6, 7 years away past me that I've clicked on a banner to do anything. It's more likely that I will actually click on a link in a text, in a content piece, actually, because I was just thinking now, how do I do it these days, right? How do I, so if I'm building more the awareness, how do I actually get people to respond back to me? How do I maybe start building up a database? Because if I want to have a customer intimacy, I want to be able to have a conversation. The best way to have a conversation is if I get your email address or your phone number or a unique identifier to start having that direct dialogue. Even if I'm not selling direct to you, I want to be able to reach you, and I want to be able to influence you to do things on other channels. So in most cases, we try to find a direct linkage so that it's not a spray and pray approach. So I spray as much marketing money and as much communication budget out there and pray that something happens, but that I can actually relate certain activities back to the actions that I have done out there.
Right.
Okay. And there, it's relatively easy these days. If you look at the Salesforce dashboards, if you look at the marketing reports that they create, a lot of those things will be good enough. They don't need to be personalized for you. The standard tools are good enough to get most of the insight, and only if you have really a lot deeper, sophisticated needs, does it make sense to actually start to customize those with partners like us.
I think that's the key, right? There's a lot of stuff that's available on a SaaS model for retail, right? And when I say retail, I mean for direct small businesses to use, SMEs to use, various services, etc. And it's a monthly pay-as-you-go model, which really helps in terms of operational expenses, etc., etc. So it's all doable. I think the world is conspiring to actually make all of this much more democratized and much easier for everyone to use.
And this is where it's interesting also. Google has opened up TensorFlow, which is the artificial intelligence engine. Amazon has opened up their recommendation engine. Everybody is basically open sourcing a lot of what a few years ago would have been seen as the secret sauce. So companies are saying, we want you to use the same technology because we get smarter when we learn about how you use the technology. We become more dominant. It's all about becoming a platform player. You've got almost everybody playing in the same space these days. So 5, 6, 7 years ago, you would have looked at Apple, you would have looked at Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Amazon, and then the more regional players, and you would have seen everybody is playing maybe in a couple of devices, hardware. Everybody's playing a few cloud-based solutions, but not across the board. If I look at that today, except for Facebook, who is still a little bit nascent in the whole hardware element, everybody's almost offering the same, right? And you are logging yourself maybe a little bit more into one of those platforms or ecosystems, but then you get the full benefit of it, and you get also the flexibility. I mean, Salesforce, if you drive through Silicon Valley these days, every other logo, as you make your way from San Francisco down to Redwood, basically says a Salesforce.com company, right? A Salesforce company or something like that. Is just the amount of business that gets snapped up and the amount of services that come on top all the time. And it's the same with Adobe. It's the same with Microsoft. It's just ridiculous. SAP even, right? You know, everybody's getting into that space, and you can almost cherry pick these days of where you want to play and with whom you want to play.
Thank you. So we got some feedback during the break that we can't be heard at the back. So if I'm going to shout, no, I'm not going to talk like that. So I hope everyone can hear at the back. And I just want to say that the moment you can't hear any of us, please just put up your hand so you remind us to speak a little bit louder at the back. Thank you. What we did was, I think we covered, broadly speaking, we covered everything we were supposed to. There are some finer points that we didn't get into. So you know what, without further ado, why don't we just jump into a Q&A session. I will, if you can just help with moderating who, and while I'm moderating over here, if you can see who's got questions and who hasn't asked, etc. And perhaps we can start right up here in front with Puneet.
Hi, so my company name is Ludifu, stands for Let Us Do It For You. And so the challenge that we face in social media is how to filter out the spam. So as in there are so many posts on newsfeed, sponsored posts on Instagram. So when you're talking about a story, right, I mean building a story, why will a user ever follow us if he's already seeing so much content on his page on a daily basis? So that's one concern. The second concern is about SEO. So everyone talks about doing SEO on a regular basis. But in this country, people go based on referrals. So if you want a cake, you'll call someone up. If you want some service, you'll call someone up. So then how should we focus on SEO? Should we not focus on SEO? Or is it just a myth that SEO is the way to go? And the third question is there a place where we can understand the cost per acquisition, like an average, so we can decide on how much to target as a spend per user for any industry?
Okay, so I think that's three questions. Just to kind of get everyone on the same page, and you know, some of you may be honest about the fact that you don't know. Some of you may not want to say that you don't know. Just to get everyone on the same page in terms of what SEO is, search engine optimization. It's basically when you search on Google, for example, which almost all of us probably search on, what results do you see? And the results that you see are not by chance. There's something that Google has called PageRank that determines your where your entry shows up, right? And PageRank keeps changing. Nobody actually knows exactly what's behind it. But search engine optimization is the art and science of actually ensuring that without paying any money, you can get your content optimized such that it shows up higher up in certain rankings. If you pay money to get that to happen, that's called search engine marketing, which is actually the source of Google's main revenue. Okay, but that's basically how it works. And the better your content, actually, so SEO is kind of a hacking thing because you're doing, it's not wrong, you're hacking your way to get it higher. In an ideal world, if you have great content which people consume, it will automatically go higher. So that's broadly what it is.
Yeah, with one caveat, Google changes those algorithms on a regular basis. So it's not, oh, I figured it out. Yeah. I'm on the first page. I'm before the jump. And now, a couple of weeks later, you say, why am I back on page number 3 or 4 or not visible? Which is the same in that case. Because they keep changing their algorithms. And there's a joke, the best place to hide a dead body is on page 2 of a Google search, right? Nobody ever looks at it. So, sorry, I forgot your first question. Spam. So I think, as I was hearing your first question, it didn't sound actually so much like spam to me, or at least not the way that I interpret spam, but if I look at your beautiful product, it's very much a high interest, or it's a special interest product, right? So the question is, do you really want to be in a news feed of every Facebook person that has ever used the keyword photo or photo book, right? Maybe Facebook is not even the right channel for you. You may say, I'm better off on some Pinterest websites where people are talking about family books, school, class photos. What are the reasons? Baby, wedding coming up. So I may want to acquire people not so much in the overall Facebook one, but maybe in some communities there, or even on other more special interest community websites.
Contextual.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that actually you amplify the chances of people engaging when you get them at the right time, right? That's
I would probably be more on a wedding planning page, or on the Facebook profile of a wedding planner than overall. Okay.
Spot on. Yeah.
And third question was?
Your second question about SEO was
whether it's
necessary. Well,
because
yes. Okay. In the context of India, for you, I would say yes, definitely it's necessary. And while yes, referrals happen, that's only because you're taking your sample size based on what you hear being referred, etc. You're not actually monitoring the thousands and the X number of transactions that occur or searches that occur. So if you read Google's Zero Moment of Truth, ZMOT, it kind of puts all of that in perspective. And I don't think anything, especially what you're describing of your business, I think is highly relevant. SEO is highly relevant for that. So, sorry, you wanted to answer?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Third question was, that's a tough one. It varies by industry and what your audience is.
Is there a fixed
acquisition
place for
cost.
everyone to kind of
benchmark? So and this may sound more difficult than it is, and I don't have a good example exactly for your core business. The concept of lifetime value is becoming more and more popular. Why? Because we are able to track individuals even without a loyalty card, just based on transaction data or other data points that we have across a lifetime or a life cycle with us. I think one of the most famous examples that I at least use a lot in my cases is Starbucks. So Starbucks, Howard Schultz, the founder who came back a couple of years ago when it wasn't doing quite as well and they lost a little bit of their core and they were everywhere, but how do we grow then? They said the best way for us to grow is also to focus more on our loyal customers. And they found out that a good customer of Starbucks has a lifetime value of $14,849 or something like that, close to $15,000. And they basically said, if you can spend, or I'll let you spend up to 5% of that lifetime value, so $750 to acquire one of these customers, because that's how powerful that particular customer is for us, right? So they turn completely their marketing strategy from let's just go and talk about all the great benefits to how do we personalize certain experiences, how do we create maybe also, and I think their loyalty program, I'll come to that in a second, is not really a good loyalty program, but it's a great acquisition tool. So how can we use up to $750 to get one customer through our door who will become a powerful customer for the next couple of years? And one of the ways to do it, and one of the digital marketing tools that they have, is actually their app. And why do I say it's not a great loyalty app? Because I need to drink, I think, 50 or 60 cups of coffee to get one free one, right?
Right.
So it's, if you compare that to, so if you compare that to any other loyalty program, typically it's drink 9, get number 10 free, or drink 5, get 6, or buy 3, get 1 free. So you get one for your birthday, you get one upsize sometime. So it's not about freebies, right? But it's about a communication method. Why is it even more powerful? In the US, the float, those of you not from the financial sector, the money that has been put onto the Starbucks app, either, well actually not, so you can either link a credit card to it or you can store money on it. The stored value, so the float that Starbucks has on its loyalty program is I think close to $1.5 billion US. That means it has more money in the bank than a lot of the banks in the US actually have. Why? Because people trust the brand with their money. So it basically means you're giving them credit. You are relevant on a daily basis. You are ordering through the app. You are paying with the app, so it makes it more seamless. So you're adding convenience to the whole journey of drinking coffee. And that's why it's actually a fantastic loyalty program without giving away a lot of freebies. So it's adding context. It's adding a little bit of an opportunity for you to engage, but it's not saying I'm leaving money on the table by just saying here every 5th cup is free. So it's a very different approach to loyalty.
No, I totally agree with you. I have personally experienced this. I have not been a Starbucks drinker till I discovered the iced Americano, and since then I also discovered the Indian app, and I have the moment it hits 1,500 rupees, because sometimes I'm ordering with 2-3 people there, it automatically reloads that amount, right? So I always have that. So they have that float. But I'm saying, even if it's got me going to Starbucks like 3 times a week for no reason from before, right? So it does work.
But you walk across the street to Starbucks instead of having the coffee shop that might be right next to you, right?
Exactly.
So you are changing your behavior because of that app.
Exactly. And this concept of LTV CAC ratio, which is what Nils is referring to, so lifetime value over customer acquisition cost. Now, Starbucks example of 20 times, that's insane, right? That's amazing. I mean, so Silicon Valley, when they actually go, their metric and their approach to acquiring customers is all based on this LTV CAC ratio. And it's very important, the denominator, which is your customer acquisition cost, people get it wrong sometimes because you have to actually include everything. It's not just the cost of media for getting that customer to click. It's your marketing department, it's your sales team, it's all of that put together, right? And some say that if you have a LTV to CAC ratio, and it varies by industry and sector, of 3 to 1, then you're in a good business. Here you've got one which is 20 times, which is phenomenal.
And I think what's interesting is, what does it mean to get a loyal customer? So Facebook, a couple of years ago, while they were growing, they found out the number one thing is not for people to have likes or to connect to brands in the first couple of days, but you need to get 7 friends within 7 days. And then there's a good likelihood that the service becomes sticky. If you don't get 7 real friends in 7 days, you will probably drop out again. You will become basically a zombie customer, because you are there, but you're not really doing anything. So the way for you to engage is 7 friends in 7 days. So their entire marketing, their entire communication for many years was just focused on getting those 7 friends into your Facebook profile within 7 days, and then that was it. So, and I think that's the one to think about. What does it mean for me to have a loyal customer? And it's not about getting 100% of their spend. It's not about getting them to do something with you every day. But what does loyalty really define? And what does a lifetime value really encompass?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. So,
I'm Pankit Desai. We are a startup in cybersecurity space. For us, all customers are typically large banks, financial services institutions, insurance companies. The question that I have from a digital marketing perspective is that while in a consumer space, an individual is a homogeneous person, right? In a let's say if I target a large bank, the buyers stratify themselves. So from a user buyer to a procurement buyer to a tech buyer. So for a transaction, you need really n number of people to come together. So how does digital marketing in that scenario look at, for me, a customer which is a stratified customer but a individual customer, right? So how does that work out?
So you're basically saying it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, right?
And within that size,
multiple stakeholders.
I think the name of the game for you is, and it's a difficult one, because like you said, there's a diversity of buyers, and if you are not yet close to the business, who's actually the decision maker, and who do I need to reach, right? I always think it's so difficult. And I remember maybe 20 years ago when I was looking for my first job, you think, oh, now I know somebody in a company, and if I can get my CV to that one individual, then everything is going to be fine. And it's true if it's that one individual that really cares or that passes it on to the right person. But if you are in the B2C space or in the B2B space and you're trying to reach that one individual, it might not be that easy. It's gotten a little bit easier these days because if you can do a good job at profiling the individuals that you're going to engage with, and LinkedIn is always a good place to start, but there's other ways, even media searches around it, is you can get a feel for who that individual is. You can almost draw up, sometimes in consulting we call it the power map, so who is actually influencing, who's on your side, who's the decision maker. And then I think it's important to say, okay, now what are those individuals interested in? What's really a reason to buy? Some people will need that that security element because they're all concerned about personal data protection, right? Others are, we want to stay out of the news for getting hacked. So what are then those individual messages? it should be easier today to say, okay, what are maybe among those 10 core benefits that your company has, what are the messages that are most relevant to the individual? But I think it's also breaking it down and getting a feeling for understanding who the consumer is, or the customer. I always talk about consumers wrong, right? Who the customer is, what's really relevant, and how do I start telling the story and the experience around that?
The follow-up question to that is, so that's a typical sales process that you follow, which is a one-to-one sale. The question more was on digital marketing front. How do we use a multi-channel medium to reach out to that stratified customer base? So what's the tools and technologies that one could kind of lean on to support that?
So I would also start then again, what are the relevant media, or what are the relevant platforms that those individuals are interested in, right? Do I need to create awareness around security being a prerequisite for us to do direct business? Is it a prerequisite for me to do business with the government? So what are the different reasons for security? What are the channels that my stakeholders are engaging in? And then is it more of a technology story, or is it more of almost like a lobbying story that I need to be telling, right? So it's but I think that's where it almost makes sense for a company like yours to work together maybe with professional writers or journalists, because you want to influence more through the content and the context than to say, I'm taking out a banner or a half page and saying security is important. Everybody knows that, right? But why is it relevant to me?
Yeah, I think content marketing is probably a very, very relevant part.
I think where you can look is look actually at Boeing. So if you Google Boeing and the B2B marketing story, there's quite a lot of good inspiration, I think, from a company like that, which is also having to deal with a relatively complex buying environment, right? If you're selling airplanes and engines, then is also quite a lot of buyers that you need to get, and it's long purchase cycles and it's big decisions, right?
GE again.
GE is another good one, yeah.
Yes.
How would your approach?
Just for everyone, if you can just identify yourself and the company. Yeah.
So I'm Vivek. I'm from the Cutting Crew. It's a production house and a post-production studio offering films that we make for corporates, for the digital world, and for social media. So my question here is, since you got into the creative space and has an agency, and you already run a successful production house and an agency, how do we project our marketing? How do we do it? I understand that people do SaaS when they run a software as a service, but as a pure service or a creative agency, how do you market this in the B2B world? Or what platforms? Because everybody's all over the place from our industry.
So I think the first thing is this, that in our business, I mean, knowing it deeply inside, you know that at the end of the day, it boils down to person-to-person contact and relationships, right? What you can do is, because at the end of the day, no one's going to give you business based on something they just saw. They will meet, right? Yeah. However, the chances of, if you're a new company that's trying to get business, or you work with a certain size of, say you work with generally work with mid-sized agencies, and you want to work with now Ogilvy and JWT, for example, in order to get noticed by them, and when you actually call them or WhatsApp them or whatever it is that you do, they actually listen receptively, and they're like, you know what, okay, come in for a meeting or whatever. I think Facebook works the best, right? There's nothing that works better than Facebook. I've seen young directors I get tagged on stuff like on a daily basis of work by people I've never met in my life, because they just want me to see it, and they do that with people in the industry. I'm not saying you necessarily do that, but once you put your you put your stuff up on Facebook, sponsored stuff, there's some stuff which is sponsored, and that somehow I kind of don't take notice of, because I'm thinking that, come on, you're obviously this isn't, you're not someone who can actually afford to be spending on paid media, yet you're doing this. So it comes across to me as a little bit desperate, right, for an individual to be doing that. Let the work speak for itself. If you've got good work and you actually manage to get some key influencers, when I use that term loosely, so you have 3 or 4 friends who are, who have good networks, make sure that they have it, get them to share it, and eventually it'll reach some of the people who are the decision makers who are going to give you the work or work with you in the future, right? So I think Facebook works very well. Other platforms, not so sure. Again, email. Now, this is something which someone asked earlier. In this era of social media dominance, is email really relevant? And the funny thing is, you know what? It is, right? So when social media became big, and perhaps Nils might know more than I do about it, I'm speaking from a little bit anecdotal, but email, there are businesses, entire businesses that are based on email marketing now. And email can work. However, you know, I think its efficacy goes up and down, but it's also about framing it in the right way, having the right kind of targeted database, etc. Some people do the spray and pray approach. You know, you send out 100,000 mails, 3 people click, open, whatever, and get through. Is that really useful? I don't know. But then there are media businesses, for example, which are, you know, email newsletters are big now again in terms of, you know, getting people to engage constantly with the brand again and again. So, for example, for me, who consumes media like, you know, something like Fast Company and another thing called DigiDay, I get the newsletter in my inbox every day, and because I'm short on time, I just pray to God there's nothing I want to read, and if there are 3 things I want to read, then I save them to read later, right? So, and that works
Sounds
really
familiar.
well. Yeah, so pocket it,
Yeah.
right? So I think email can also work. It depends on your database and if you're engaging with them with the right kind of messaging. Anything to add?
No, I think it's sounds very familiar, that behavior, but it's I mean, email marketing is a different story today than it was a few years ago.
Yeah.
A few years ago it was very static. Today it's dynamic, right? If you're in the right inbox and you have the chance to get some visibility, your content gets updated in real time, given at what time that person opens and if he's online, right? So it's become a little bit more effective there again. But it's not about sending it to as many people as possible, because then people just tune out, right? Yes, it's basically for free to send it out, but it actually comes at a high cost of having then more that spam effect, right? And I also have these 2 or 3 newsletters that I tend to look at more often, and then there's some which I just haven't pushed unsubscribe yet, and it's only because I'm interested from a professional perspective to see what's coming next, right? For a while I didn't log into Facebook for almost a year. I just wanted to see how much more pressure are they putting on, how many more friend requests, how many more pokes, how many more mentions, and at some point I got like 2 mails a day, and then I was still refusing, and then the only reason that I got back in is because people congratulated me on my birthday. So I said, okay, I need to be replying, because I can't do a 2nd year in a row of not acknowledging that act of friendship, right? It's quite interesting of how extreme these things have become.
Yeah.
So if you can just build on that point further, and I'm Vineet, by the way, also from Accenture. One traditional firm, which is Victoria's Secret. So Harsh spoke very well how Nykaa has disrupted and doesn't need physical space. But somebody in the traditional space, I mean Victoria's Secret, similar, I mean it's also into bath and body, has taken an ambitious target of raising the e-com related revenue from 3% to 20% by 2020. But the point is that the foundation of this jump is coming from email marketing. Now, email by itself sounds rudimentary, but the input to that is loyalty, analytics for customized recommendation, and I think they're also wading into the direction of personalized production or product personalization after a scale. So all of this coming together makes the communication that much more engaging, but more importantly, email marketing alone being the foundation from going from 3 to 20.
Okay. Hi.
Manish Daga, you just mentioned.
Sorry, Manish. What do you do?
I'm into raw cotton.
Okay.
We grow cotton, we trade cotton, export cotton. And the only certified cotton valuer in India, that USP we present in all over social media. Basically, we have a newsletter which is part of our service. Since last 4 years, we have been sending it as a complimentary to all our subscribers. They are about 10,000 plus all over the world. We have got a kind word from the PM and the CM also that it's good work, you keep it up there. Now we are thinking of commercializing it. Till now it's a complimentary service. How do we get started with it? And
When you say commercializing, is making it subscription based or monetizing the platform for others to pay to be part of your newsletter? Because I think there's two very different ways of looking at it. I mean, and obviously there's a way that includes both, but that's the more difficult one. So, it's,
so I would like your kind word on that, which would be the best approach.
But I mean, the thing is, a lot of companies dream about, and actually some do, data monetization these days. So what do they mean when they talk about data monetization? It's saying, we have a powerful customer base. We have a good chance that Roopak will open our newsletter. And if you want to reach Roopak, you can actually use us as a way to communicate with them, either through an email, through a push message, through popping up at a relevant point of time, through whatever way we can reach them, right? And then the question is, if you are trying to reach Roopak, how much would you pay for him to do a specific action, right? Either to engage with your brand or to become a customer. So that's a very simple way of talking about data monetization. So that's one way that you can say, okay, I've got 10,000 highly interesting people here because they're all high-value businessmen who are also interested potentially in other products. I've created a platform now that allows you to reach that. I think it's almost a more elegant way than now to say, if you want to continue receiving this interesting insight, because a lot of information these days is free, and there's always a risk of losing a lot of people if you say, now you have to pay me, even if it's just a nominal amount of money. So there's always some that will say, okay, great, now it's more exclusive, and I will pay for it, and others will say, no, right? I mean, how many of you will pay for Facebook if, and how much would you pay per month, right? Or how much will pay for this or that? So there's always a risk of having that hurdle.
No, I was going to say I have a kind of a counter view to that, which is the opposite, because it depends on how engaged your audience is, right? And if it can be viewed as a differentiated premium product within the global cotton industry, and it's a business knowledge tool in a way, then you actually would have a chance of subscription. The potential risk with actually having people pay to be featured, etc., is that then so for example, there's something I don't know if you guys there's a publication called Silicon India, which keeps reaching out to everyone to say you have become this thing, top 10, whatever, please pay to be featured or whatever. Right? Obviously that approach is a little extreme, right? So, but you don't want to do that either. However, in terms of advertising, of course, yes, that can be great. But what's happening is in the US, because I'm in the digital media space per se, there's this thing called the concept of membership, right? So what is your thing called, the publication? The
Cotton Guru fortnightly newsletter.
Okay, so Cotton Guru.
Guru is the brand name.
Right, so Cotton Guru is the brand, which is actually great. Strong brand you can create out of that. So if you want to become a Cotton Guru member, okay, you as a non-subscriber, you have access to a lot of content. However, if you get membership of Cotton Guru at $395 a year, which is the magic number that everyone seems to be charging, okay, you can actually give them access to a whole bunch of other stuff. You might not have a large base in the beginning, but you will have a certain percentage of, because at the end of the day, it's a work tool, right? They can justify the budget. $400 for access to that kind of premium data, etc., can be done. So there are pros and cons of both. You also have to see how to position it, but there are endless possibilities. If you have a differentiated B2B media brand that you've created, there's a lot you can do with it. That's a pretty powerful thing you're setting up.
Yeah, this newsletter has given me, exposure as a media also. Now we have a Cotton Guru media in place, and I've been invited to all the international conference in cotton on a complimentary basis since last 2 years, only because of
Wow. See?
And I've been speaker in 4 countries only because of this.
That's awesome.
Now, how the dilemma was: should it just let it go on, or should I commercialize?
I think you're sitting on something, because if you're passionate about it, great. You can also, I'll tell you, there will be a lot of trade industry focused media groups who will be wanting to acquire Cotton Guru in a few years.
No, they have approached that as well.
So already happening.
So I'm already writing for them.
Hi, my name is Abhinav. I'm a medical device manufacturer. So this question is for Harsh. Like you talk about right to win, like when you shifted from thin packaging to plastic packaging, that shifted your market share. So can digital marketing be a big strategy for a right to win for Marico? Like
See, Marico is a mass distributed product, so you can't just exclusively say that I will use digital marketing. It will be in combination with mass media because most of our brands are mass advertised. But digital can be an important part, and I think in some cases the digital marketing budget can go, Mukesh, how much would it be? 30-40% of the total budget of the brand?
Selected brand could be between around mid-teens.
Yeah, so I think
More
that's,
amenable to
yeah. But Rishabh's, again, FMCG launch, I think most of the money is going into digital marketing.
A large percentage of our sort of will be around at least 40 or 40%.
Yeah.
So it depends on the business.
Yes.
Depends on the business. Yes.
My name is Dr. Shweta and I run a beauty clinic where we use advanced medical technology for amazing skin, hair and body shape. And I believe, since it's a knowledge, what I primarily give is knowledge. So the content that you spoke that is used in marketing is, I believe in it big time. How can you offer value through content, and those things I'm there. I blog and make that one of my ways to reach out to my clients, and it works reasonably effectively. What I want to know is how much of content is important and how important is it that I use the keywords effectively when I blog. Does that make a big difference, and how much? Because the keywords constantly change. What is being searched for may change on a daily basis or maybe even more than that. So how important is it for me to know what keyword should I be using to title my blog, or to use certain words in the blog, or even if I create a video content like you were talking about, to title it or to hashtag it, how much should I be in connect with the keywords?
How much should you let it drive your thinking and strategy? I'd say it's pretty important. I don't think it should determine what you do, but you should. It's kind of like seasoning and dressing on top, which really enhances what you do. Optimizing. If you can optimize, you can easily make a 10, 20, even in some cases 50% difference in terms of take sometimes even more. It also depends on if you go back to your strategy in terms of when you're saying how much content should I produce. My question is, how much content can you produce? You also have a business to run. You haven't gotten into this just to create that content, right? So it's something you're doing. It's something you're comfortable with. Regularity often is key. And if you can be predictable to your audience in terms of, what, Dr. Shweta is going to produce something every Friday, I'm going to get something every Friday morning from her. If you can afford to do it twice a week, 3 times a week, whatever, but you need to know. Or if you have a team that's doing it, then, then you just get them to do what you agree on. But optimizing really does help. It can make a big difference, even in terms of your video, in knowing like 10 tips and do's and don'ts in terms of how long to make, or, for example, thumbnails or what to title it. All of that can make a big difference and impact in terms of how much traction it gets organically.
So, since the content, the knowledge that is being shared is being driven by me, so I should collaborate with somebody who understands the SEO bit to help me do those
You can get a freelance SEO consultant. That would probably be my advice. Just get someone who makes you conscious of it and can review your things every week, and you say, there's a process you put in place. I will write by Thursday, you please review, give it to me by Friday 2 o'clock, I will upload at 3, whatever it is, So that kind of thing. Yeah. So we have a question at the back.
Yeah, hi, I'm Smriti Dalvi.
Smriti, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Just testing.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Smriti Dalvi. I run Florista. We are into delivering flowers and gifts worldwide. So last 2 years we've seen a dip in terms of organic traffic coming to our website, and we're not able to figure out why, in spite of changing. And we don't have real, large budgets to do. So we know that we need to advertise to get the traffic in consistently. What we've also seen is we can't really compete with the big fishes like Amazon and Flipkart, who also put in money for delivering gifts per se. So what happens is, whatever little bit of digital marketing we do, I get calls from Google saying that you need to up your budget, and we also see limited by budget. So how much is limited by budget? You can't just keep increasing your budget. So what happens is the cost per conversion goes really, really high. So we've seen the ticket size of an order on our website is about $12.50 today. And my cost per conversion is about 7,000, 8,000. So is it really relevant in continuously hiking up that? Because you can't just keep putting money into digital marketing. We don't really have those kind of funds to put into that.
You said your customer base is where?
Customer base primarily India.
Okay.
And yeah, so it's actually 80% India and 20%.
So I don't know the Indian landscape so well that I would be able to say do this, or that. So my first reaction when I hear something like that is it's typical Google, obviously, because they say give us more, you get more. But that's I feel a little bit like the old media agency type of doing it, because they only have one platform to give. If somebody once said, if you want to beat Mike Tyson, you probably shouldn't choose boxing because it's there's maybe other sports where you have a better chance, right? Or whoever, the Klitschko brothers. So the question is, are there other channels where, because if you are on Google, you are competing against Fleurop and Flowers.com and all of the big spenders who probably have a longer perspective of how they want to acquire the market. So is there a different way, another elegant way to actually bring out what makes you special, being a local player who probably understands the flower scene, the occasions better, potential bundling things? Is there a way for you to cooperate maybe with a Flipkart or somebody who will add you as an additional element? So I think we would need to look at, are there other platforms where it's better to market on? Are there communities where you can get in? Because I think if you just compete on Google, it's exactly this: you're drinking from a hose, or others are drinking from that hose, and it's an endless stream of money that you can throw at it without probably seeing the results that you would rightfully expect.
I totally agree. I think, at the end of the day, if you know that you're competing against people who have exponentially more financial muscle, there's no point getting into that game. It's, the short answer, or another way to describe, I think, what Nils is saying is, you try and build a brand, perhaps, which is brand affinity with a smaller community, perhaps, strategic alliances, etc. So I totally agree. Just shift the frame of reference and where you're competing. That's the only way to do it.
I'm Nirav Samir. We're into redevelopment space within Mumbai, and we often see that while our primary audience is the 25 or 30 to 50-year-olds, the key decision makers often tend to be the matriarch or the patriarch of the family, because spends are anywhere between 4 to 9 crores for the products that we're creating. So while digital media can be used to attract the younger audience and get them to shortlist the products, often this strategy may not work for the decision makers who finally say, yes, this is good value and go ahead. How does one approach digital marketing in such a scenario?
If the patriarch and matriarch are not likely to be on digital, it's a very tough one. I think you would probably then employ an online-offline strategy where you have to create, I don't know if you have sort of model flats and things like that, or whatever it might be. I think you intrigue the gatekeepers, which in this case are your younger audience, the older kids, or whatever it might be. And then after that, it's really about sampling, etc., and you engage with them. So I think that, it was my friend Sanjay Mariwala, who is in our group, who was telling me about how when they, in Kerala, so he has factory in Kerala, and when they employ students from engineering school, their outreach, one strand of outreach is to the students, but the main engagement happens with the parents, because especially in in a lot of parts of India, smaller towns, South India especially, it's the parents who decide, okay, you should choose this company and go and work there, right? So they're the decision makers, so engage with them. Yes. Sorry. Yeah.
Hi. I'm Jigar Bora from Entropy Innovations. We have built an innovative product which is automatic two-wheeler washing machine. And using these machines, we basically provide franchises similar to Subways. So these franchises are the product that we want to market. So these franchises are normally taken by HNI, who has a ticket size that he can sell like 10-12 lakh rupees, and trying to understand how we can target this kind of B2B franchisee takers to take up our franchising.
What is the actual product to the consumer? Washing?
It's an automatic two-wheeler washing machine is the USP of the store.
Okay.
And for those stores, we already have approved sites, so we can actually help them with site finalization. We have helped them with the whole setup. So it's similar to like Subway, where they help them with complete
franchise
setup,
yeah.
complete franchising. We have that models which are already placed. We have like 30 outlets, so we do showcase that is like the second step. But then how to reach out in the most effective way, and which channels we should do this digital marketing.
Recruitment of potential franchisees.
Yes, recruitment of potential.
Okay. I would say, see, to me, what is in it for them? I don't think, you're playing on basically it being a lucrative opportunity, right?
Right.
Like I don't think they otherwise would think that, okay, this is something that I want to do. You have to kind of it's almost like putting it forward as an investment proposal,
yes,
right? Which is a great investment to make because you get your money back,
ROI.
etc. So if you treat it like that as a financial product almost, where you then start to talk about potential return, risk, etc., then you follow. I would say that you can LinkedIn again is a possibility perhaps, but I think if I think about it, financial products perhaps
it's a brick and mortar store at the end. So
yeah. So I don't know. Sorry. I was just thinking that perhaps is there a potential of tying up with banks and private wealth managers, perhaps and these are typically in smaller towns. Are they?
Yeah, not necessarily.
The franchisees.
We already have across major cities. Smaller towns, they normally don't take up franchises a lot. I mean, the first step will be it will grow across metros,
okay,
then it will grow to the tier 2.
So I would typically then look at the same way you would look at a financial product is how at first thought I would think, where you would target wealth managers as perhaps a suggested opportunity.
Okay, so I mean, if I have to do some kind of digital marketing for that, I should be focusing on the wealth managers.
Not necessarily. I mean, it's a slightly specialized space, so one has to think about it. So I think it's. I don't have a straight answer to that, but
do you have a view of who your perfect franchisee would be? Do you have like a profile of this would be my perfect franchisee?
So it's normally a local. It's a local thing. So let's say if in Mumbai itself, I stay at Andheri, I'll prefer to take up a space in Mumbai, in Andheri, rather than going till South Bombay at Churchgate to set up the store, because it will be inconvenient for me to operate the complete store. So it's generally a localized thing. So that will be our first requirement, that a person in the same vicinity. Secondly, obviously he should be of the auto industry. So he understands the market, yep. He understands how to cater at the end, because it's a service that needs to be given. So some amount of consumer interaction will be convenient for him. So that will be basic profiling, and the amount of money that he needs to invest, which is like 10-12 lakhs.
So I just watched, so I fly a lot, so I watch a lot of movies on planes. And I watched a movie called The Founder, which was about Ray Kroc and McDonald's. And one scene was quite interesting. So initially he reached out to all the people who were in his country club and said, "This is a great investment opportunity for people who already had a lot of money to invest and to get some nice returns." And then like a scene later, he sees some of these places have been completely made into the opposite of what his view of what it would be, right? Because now they said, okay, we're going to sell chicken because we feel the right to sell chicken, and we're going to call it a little bit different, this and that. So he turned it completely around. He said, similar to what you were saying, I need somebody who has money to spare, who's a businessman, who knows what to do, and is maybe living in a certain part, so I'll give him the franchise there. And then he gave it to the younger and hungrier type of individual, saying, who are passionate about running this, who are going to be in the store every day and making it a success based on his concept. So he completely switched the profile of who he invited to be there, and I thought that was quite interesting. So to me, it really begins of having a deep understanding of what would be, because you want to grow the franchise, who would be that ideal person? So the three that you have mentioned attributes were still a bit high level. So what other 5 things need to be true? And then you can start to see, okay, is there a digital channel where I can actually acquire them, or is there another place that I should be creating awareness around it? But I think, you know, going a little bit deeper into what are those attributes that really define a successful future franchisee is what's required.
You said something about the auto industry, which
right. I mean, some amount of relevance with the auto industry. Maybe if they have like a dealership or something.
So then automatically you can narrow down
the channel which we are tapping, but it's an offline channel, more like they have this magazines and stuff. So we do those offline. In online presence, what we do is more on the Google AdWords.
Because in the end, you need people to watch a video about your product, right?
Yes.
So you need to get digital is the right way to project it. It's much better than having here's a small 2 or 3 page leaflet about.
Exactly.
And I think it's the same actually for your beauty one. So a written blog is good, but some video probably is the icing on the cake, right? So it's more around what type of media can you use, and then we can start looking at what's the right platform to play that video.
So what I would do is, to Nils's point, you would take that database of your car dealership, look at their profile, and then after that start looking at how to target that typical kind of audience. Yeah.
I mean, worst cases, you even, or not worst case, maybe best cases, if people don't listen to you, then you start projecting on the building across the street from that dealership that video that you want them to see, right? And after 3 days, I'm sure somebody will take a glimpse at it. And
I'm Dr. Sanjay. Run a chain of diagnostic centers across Mumbai and Pune called Suburban Diagnostics. A little generic question. Is there a recipe for making a digital campaign viral, especially in the healthcare space, or in general? Is there a recipe?
Short answer. You mean prescription? Yeah, exactly. You mean prescription, I think. The answer is no. So that's the short answer. The long answer is you can do certain things to kind of increase your chances, and that is what is, optimization, etc. But if you follow a good process and you are true to, you do certain, so you take certain principles of communications. So for example, single-minded messaging, etc., then everything is clear, right? Because it's not just about making it go viral, it's also about, what your objective is with that campaign, what messaging you want to get across. Maybe it's just about drumming up awareness so that people then click. That's the other thing, right? So in the digital space, you can then, there's a call through, an action, a click through, which you may have no messaging at all. And there are brands that do this at times, right? It might just be so crazy, you watch it and then click here if you're more curious, and then you go there. But then that doesn't do much for your brand often enough, right? You're in a somewhat serious space at the very least. So you have to think about all of that, and then you have to think about the optimization bit. But in the middle, there is a big black box. Now, perhaps the folks at Accenture have figured out the answer to how to make a campaign go viral.
So it's depending on the size of your business and what viral then means. It can require a lot of love and attention. So I'll take an example that's now 5 years old. Actually, before the time that I joined Accenture. So we helped the most effective digital campaign at the London Olympics. It's this "I Love You, Mommy" campaign by P&G. But why was it successful? Because, and we wouldn't need that many people today, but back then we had about 400 people working on a constant optimization, where it's played, bits and pieces of the content were changed, channels were changed. So 400 people to make the most successful. The second most successful one was Visa, which we also did jointly with Visa. That was a bit easier. But the P&G one, which appealed a lot to the emotions, a lot to families and mothers and all of that, 400 people optimizing across all the different channels, across the different countries. So that was obviously a global play and a global event, but it required a lot of love and attention, right? Even though the content was already very strong.
It's crazy, actually, if you want to know about this optimization that they did. So you're watching an ad which is showing the result of a race. So I couldn't remember, there was a US swimmer who actually swam that women's event, and the story was about her, and in the end of the ad, you actually saw her winning the race, which just happened 2 minutes ago.
Yep.
Okay, so that's the level of optimization that happened.
And that obviously is what people picked it up, and then they talk about it, and they say, look at this, and so it's
Yeah, that was pretty impactful.
But there's, I think in your area, it's a very high interest product, obviously, and it's about making it interesting and entertaining, I guess, right?
Yeah, there's, so even for example, if I go back to Kolaveri, okay, which Sony Music was our client. So Kolaveri is the most viewed Indian video of all time till today, and we were
Gangnam Style.
Yes, exactly. It's the Gangnam Style of India. So we kind of made it go viral. What we did in the organic world, where organic traction worked, we did a lot of good things to make it happen, a very innovative social media strategy, seeded in the right places, got the right people to push. But honestly, we did like 5 things. And after that, it acquired a life of its own. And suddenly on day 3, we saw Japanese women doing aerobics in a video to the song. We were like, okay, this has just acquired a life of its own. Then once we saw the traction it acquired, we then started this global push saying, for example, all European countries had started sharing it and no one from Iceland. So we started targeting Iceland on Twitter saying, hello Iceland, is anyone there? And then someone from Iceland shared it, right? So started doing things like that. So you have to kind of, honestly, like I would always tell people, I think, we did 30% of the work and got it till here. What happened beyond that was just sheer luck.
I think we have time for maybe one more question.
Okay. Yes.
My name is Hemal and I represent the Enrich Group, and my company name is Obov HR. My question is, how do you engage your existing customer on digital platform? Because as someone rightly mentioned, that major of customer new leads come through referrals. How do you engage them? What are the different mediums of digital medium through platform you can engage them?
So the question is, how do you convert them to a digital?
No, your current customer base. How do you keep them?
But how do you convert them to be from an offline customer base to an online, to a digital, or?
So you already have a set of existing customers. You need to
transform them onto a digital platform, or so they are
engage them.
Keep them engaged with the brand, I guess. Yeah.
What type of products are you?
We do HR services.
HR services. Okay.
So existing customers who are using the HR services, how do you keep them engaged?
The best part, the referral is the best way to generate new leads.
Yeah.
That's how we work. So if we engage with the existing lot properly, that's what we are discussing. So that's how we generate new leads.
I would say again, content becomes a big part of it. So I'll give you an example. We use a few different consultants for various aspects of our regulatory and compliance work. And so one of our non-auditor consultants who does some tax work for us, the guy, so it's a father and son run partnership firm, and they do a few different things. The son, who is probably in his 30s, got sort of quite excited about content marketing, and a couple of years ago started this newsletter and creating content about, giving a view on any tax ruling, and every week an update goes out to their existing client base, talking about a ruling in the High Court of Karnataka where, SSC this and that or whatever. And some of it is relevant to you. Maybe 1 out of 6 pieces will be relevant, and you'll read it. And you're like, and in my mind, every time I see him, it's because I'm from the content marketing business, I'm like, well done, and he gets really excited and all that, further encouraged. But even if I were not, I think this stuff is relevant to me, and in that process, I start to view these guys differently, right? I mean, I have KPMG as auditors, and these guys were a much smaller firm, but I start to view them in terms of the thought leadership, because in their head, they're like, one day we can replace KPMG completely or whatever. Yeah, exactly. So it does work. But even, existing customer base, if you look at it, sometimes, in the consumer space, I think the best example I have of getting your consumers to do your marketing is GoPro. Right? So how many of you have used a GoPro device? Right? It's this little camera which has taken the world by storm, and people, actually it was used for sporting equipment or sporting clothing or whatever, right? Now here's this camera which actually, what's their biggest piece of marketing? Their biggest piece of marketing is, what happens is that they are getting paid by people, say $500 a pop, to buy a camera and to market for them, because you take all this footage, and the best footage GoPro footage you actually share, and you share with GoPro on their site or on their channels, and they take that and further promote it, saying, wow, look at this footage. So actually you're paying them for the privilege of marketing for them, which is just sheer genius if you think about it on a macro level.
I have a question.
Yes.
So for ASCENT, which is neither a product or a service, but it's a concept, which is a peer-to-peer learning platform for entrepreneurs. How do we leverage members to talk more about us, and how will that help with customer acquisition in the whole social media piece? Because we know entrepreneurs are online, but it's becoming very challenging for us to move from a 300-member cohort to a larger scale that we envisage for the platform. It's becoming very difficult for us to do customer acquisition and also leveraging members, existing members.
So you and I have talked about this. So Nils, you want to give your perspective?
So is the focus more on acquiring more, or to get people to be more engaged on the platform?
So the members are the people who are benefiting from the model, right? So they need to talk. And
so I think I would, and I like the fact that you're already using Workplace in your company, right? Find a platform that makes it easier for people to engage, because I mean, if you have a platform like Workplace, you already have a moderation element into it, right? So it makes it a lot easier for you to make it easier for people to share, and then make it a privilege for people to allow to acquire. So in the end, often scarcity and having that by invitation only is still the best way to build communities, because if people are engaged and they're a relevant part of a community, it's a lot more fun than if we're just doing a linear type of getting people onto our more or less static platforms. So that we'll build it more around a vibrant community.
Sound familiar? Remember who else?
Same thing, same advice.
And we didn't align before.
Yeah, exactly. So it's got to be right.
Great. Any more questions? We wind up? Okay. Thank you so much. Quickly give a vote of thanks. Thank you so much, Nils, for flying all the way from Singapore. Nice to have people from Accenture also join us in our way of taking this content forward for entrepreneurs who are ready to scale up and ready to ascent as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roopak, for always being a great member and at the first goes agreeing to be a part of this whole thing and moderating this, and I'm glad we had you. I couldn't think of anybody else who could have moderated this so well. And last but not the least, Harsh, thank you for taking out so much time for us and always being there in terms of taking ASCENT forward. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.